5 minutes, so maybe 6:05 we'll get started. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Hey, everybody. As usual, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. We're so excited for this session. Harrison's awesome. Obviously, you guys may have seen our post and seen his huge track record of all of his accolades and how awesome he is. So this is going to be a very informative session. But I mean, honestly, past all that stuff, we really love him for his personality. He's a really cool guy, very transparent, not going to sugarcoat everything and kind of tell you all of this pertinent information that's actually going to help you guys out. I know there's a million other things that you could be doing right now, and you know, sometimes joining this stuff is kind of anxiety inducing because you don't want to nitpick your own application, but I think doing this is a good investment on your future. So very proud of you guys, impressed. Y'all are awesome as usual. Real quick, so the quiz is going to be a little bit different this time since it's not necessarily a shadowing session. We're going to still give you a certificate, but this time we're just asking for a short summary of what was talked about during the session, or maybe some points that stood out to you. And then on your certificate, it'll say webinar, which you can include under the activities thing. So a little bit a different way to diversify your application rather than just straight shadowing. So a little something different this time. And then last thing, guys, just for the chat, please, as usual, be as active as you like. Questions, comments, anything, we love to see it. Even if you want to just, you know, tell him that he's awesome, we love to see that. So we'll try and relay that to Harrison periodically. Maybe at the end, if we do like kind of like a short Q&A or something like that. So yeah, guys, just feel free to speak up on the chat. We'll be keeping an eye on it the whole time. But I think that's everything. Harrison, if you're ready, it's all you.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much for having me, by the way. I'm super excited to be here. These guys at Pre-PAPals do an awesome job of really putting this all together and making things easy. And frankly, this mission of being able to bring practicing PAs and people in the PA world to those of you interested in joining us in the PA profession is a really great opportunity. So I want to thank them and thank all of you for joining me tonight, because this is kind of the fun part of the career, when you get to sort of look back and share what you've learned and the mistakes you've made and all those things with people who want to come and join you as colleagues. So I'm very, very, very excited to be here. And, I hope to do more of these in the future as well. If any of you were able to join me on a session that I did on Instagram a little while back, I'm hoping to bring you some new information tonight. I'll also touch on some concepts that I talked about in that last video, but I understand that this might be the first time we're meeting. So I'm going to do my best to really give you a balanced view of kind of, my perspective. And really what informs my perspective is my background up to this point in my career. And so I'm happy to give you a little bit of a rundown, not because I love talking about it, even though I do like talking about myself a little bit, but because I really think you need to get in the habit of vetting information, of really knowing who is giving you advice and where you're really taking that advice from that's going to have a big impact on your career. I really wouldn't have done this type of a talk before this point in my career, because in my mind, I'm just now starting to get some of the experience and qualifications and credentials to be able to talk to you, not just from a place of experience, but a place of authority and being able to gather not just my opinion, but the opinions of my colleagues. So with enough of that preamble, my name is Harrison Reed. I am a physician assistant. I graduated from the Yale PA program back in 2012. So for me, that was just a blink of the eye ago, but I know for a lot of you, you might have been in middle school or something back then. So I can still remember that PA application process. But frankly, I'm a little bit removed, and where my experience comes from now is from the perspective of a faculty member at a PA program. So I spent most of my career in critical care medicine. I've worked at Cleveland Clinic, and I've worked at University of Maryland in shock trauma, and now at George Washington University Hospital. I've also spent a little bit of time in the emergency department as well. But my current full-time job is as a faculty member at the George Washington University PA program. So in that role, I'm really a full-time educator, a full-time teacher. I really get involved with students from the minute they join our program until they graduate. And part of that role is also engaging in the admissions process from start to finish. I had previous exposure to this admissions process as an applicant, as a PA student, even as an alumnus of my program who would, grade interviews or essays or something like that. But I really never felt like I had insight into the entire process to the point where I could benefit you with that information until I became a full-time faculty member and really engaged that process, start to finish, completely behind the scenes. And so while I can't give you the codes to crack the PA admissions process, I do really want to pull back that curtain a little bit and speak to you from that insider perspective, not because I want to blow up the whole machine, but because I really want you to come in eyes wide open. I want you to know the things that you can do to make yourself a better applicant. And really, I want those of you at your very best to join us in the profession and to be successful. And those of you who could use a little bit of work, I want to help you do that too. So that's where I'm coming from. And, that's kind of what's informing a lot of what I'll talk to you about tonight. I've got a few disclaimers. In addition to that, I'm not representing the university specifically. So I work at George Washington University. They support me in things inside and outside of that job. And they really do like the fact that our faculty are able to be open and honest and engage those of you that are looking to become students. However, I just have to make it really clear. The things that I say tonight are my own views, my own perspective. They don't represent the university officially. And so I just don't want to blur that line at all. This is Harrison Reed talking. This is not George Washington University talking. The other thing is I'm not giving advice specific to a program, my program, the program I graduated from, or any program specifically. I'm talking about the culmination of my experiences, but also the insights I've gathered from some of my faculty friends, some of my colleagues, just keeping my eyes open and close to the ground over the last 10 years. So I don't want you to think that I'm specifically talking about my program when I make observations. However, that's obviously an influence on my perspective, of course. And lastly, I'm strictly giving you my opinion. I can't emphasize enough that I'm a flawed human being. I don't know everything, and not everything I say tonight is going to necessarily be correct for every individual or forever. So take everything with a grain of salt. Understand that this is my opinion. I'm not telling you to make major life changes or major career moves based on what you hear tonight. I'm trying to supplement the decisions you would already be making, and I want you to exercise your own judgment at all times when you're considering heavy things like your own career. All right, so that is kind of my little intro, and to keep my hands clean and so no one gets mad at me later. But what I want to do to start this process is talk to you a little bit about the admissions process itself. I think a lot of you probably have dates marked on your calendar. You know when CASPA opens and closes. You probably have a general idea of how the application cycle runs. But I want to talk to you about how that application cycle looks from the inside. And the reason I'm going to talk about that from the start here is because the answers to a lot of those questions you all have been sending me or been sending the Pre-PAPals depend on what part of that application process we're talking about. So let me break it down for you a little bit. There's really stages to your PA application and admissions process from the very start. So you as an applicant, you're probably looking at CASPA as your complete product, right? You're putting everything you have into that CASPA application. Maybe there's some supplemental applications. Maybe you'll do a few other things to tweak here or there, or snag a program that doesn't use CASPA if they're out there still. But really, your entire life gets put into CASPA. But that's not where it stops. So that very first outer layer of this application process is CASPA. What they decide, what they accept, the way they calculate things, the way that they label things. CASPA controls a lot of that early gateway into the application process. So you should really be familiar with the sort of policies that they have, the costs associated with applications, and just the way that they handle information. You're all a very diverse crowd in a lot of ways, coming from a lot of different places, a lot of different institutions with a lot of different experiences. And CASPA has to kind of have a uniform way of organizing and ordering those things. It's not perfect. So some things kind of get shoehorned into categories, and some things get manipulated a little bit so that they fit the structure of the application process. So be really familiar right off the bat. Don't shoot yourself in the foot by being unfamiliar with that CASPA process. Okay, I'm not here to talk about CASPA. So much of that information can be found on their website and by contacting CASPA. I don't want to waste your time and my time here tonight just talking about that one application process. So what happens after CASPA? Well, your information is gathered and it's sent to PA programs themselves. And PA programs can request that information in different specifications. So a PA program might want this type of GPA or might want these types of hours, or they may have preferences. So even though CASPA has packaged that information, you should know that individual programs might acquire that information and also might view and slice up and dissect that information in different ways. You don't do anything about that, okay? You just need to know that if you hear one thing from one program and a different thing from a different program, you're not going crazy. No one's lying to you. There just might be variation there. Okay, so when these programs get that information from CASPA, you're really getting an initial screening process that's happening there. It's likely that that screening process is not even taking place with a faculty member at the program. They may have staff members, they may have automated processes in which they sort through that information. You might call it screening or filtering, but really what they want to do is make sure that faculty members and people who are using their time to really evaluate these applications in depth are not using that time to evaluate people who would not meet the qualifications of the program. So that's where you're going to get into the world of minimum requirements like GPAs or GREs, or perhaps maybe just classes that you have on your transcript. There may be minimum hours or shadowing requirements. That's where you're going to start to see applications start getting screened out if they don't meet that process. So how do you know if you're going to get screened out from that initial process? Well, you probably should go and contact the website or the front-facing information for a PA program, whether that's an information brochure or an orientation session or just their website itself. And if you have questions about how you specifically would interface with that program, you should probably contact that PA program's admissions office and just ask them. Often it's in their best interest to give you a good answer, because if you don't meet the qualifications, they don't want to spend the time filtering you out. And if you do meet the qualifications, they want you in their program. So within reason, don't hesitate to reach out and figure out, hey, I know you have this specific requirement. I'm really interested in your program. What do you think about my application? And really, even from the start, I want you to approach those communications in a really professional manner. I know a lot of you are well versed in the professional world, but don't forget that really we're making assessments of you at every stage. And it's not to say that this is some crazy Men in Black recruiting process, but truthfully, if you're rude to somebody from the get-go, we can only assume that that's how you treat all people, and even patients. And we don't want that kind of a person representing our program. So really be courteous, professional, make life easy on the people that are trying to help you. And that's just good advice across the board. So that's the screening process, where you're going to need to know if you've met those minimum requirements. So screening processes are really about meeting the minimum requirements so that your application is not filtered out. Well, after that, your application is probably going to go to its first real in-depth, analysis from somebody who has in-depth knowledge about the program. Frequently and often, and frankly, as far as I know, without exception, you're going to get somebody like a faculty member laying eyes on that application. It might be one person, it might be two, it might be 50, I don't know. It varies by program. But you're going to get somebody who's going to look at that application. They're probably going to have some kind of objective criteria looking at it, like, how many hours does this person have in the healthcare world, and are those hours valuable? But they're probably also going to apply a little bit of judgment, a little bit of subjectivity to it. This project this person did seems really valuable for the PA profession, or this thing that somebody did, it doesn't seem quite as good as this other thing that a different applicant did that would generally be categorized under the same umbrella. So that's where you're going to see people starting to exercise judgment as they evaluate your application. And this is the stage where a lot of your questions fall into, where you're saying, how is this seen, or how is that seen? And when I sit back and I say, well, there's going to be, a range of opinions, or there's going to be some biases applied to that, or I just don't know, it's going to vary. It's because at this stage, there's a lot of different programs that set a standard. And then there's a lot of different people, individual evaluators, who are going to be applying their own subjectivity, their own judgment to that process. And so it's important for you to know that most programs really do want this to be fair. They want it to be uniform. They don't want it to be the luck of the draw. They don't want it to be, great to get John the evaluator and terrible to get Jim the evaluator, because that's not fair. Then it's just a flip of a coin if you get into the program. So they'll typically set, a range of criteria. Maybe it's a rubric, maybe it's a grading system, maybe it's just a general mission and values stated. And that'll set the stage for, our application of judgment as we look at your application. That was a poor word choice, but we'll really need to say, okay, I know that I'm supposed to be evaluating it for this, but I'm going to use my brain here and see that, okay, even though this person didn't meet the letter of the law here, they met the spirit of it. They really did this amazing work, and it didn't check A, B, C, and D boxes, but wow, what a great person to be in our program. So most programs, if they're smart, will also allow some of that judgment to be exercised. So that's really where you're going to get the bulk of that first evaluation of your application. From that group, typically, programs will then choose their invitees, the invitations that they're going to send out for interviews. So you'll have that whole big bunch of people tapped for interviews, and it's probably going to be a lot more than they will really be able to accept, because we know some people aren't even going to show up for the interview. Some people are going to interview horribly. Not a lot. You'd be surprised. Most interviews are actually pretty good. And some people are going to, not be accepted. Some people are going to be accepted and not come here. Some people are going to think they're going to come here and then at the last minute change their mind. So we're probably going to cast a wide net and interview a lot more people than we think are going to come to this program. You can probably guess the next step. Of course, that's the interview process. And I think a lot of people have a misconception about the interview in that it happens in isolation. They think, well, I made it through that application screening process. Somebody graded my application. They think I'm good to go. I'm in the interview. It's just a 50-50 coin toss. It's just how much they like me from this point on. And that may be true in some ways. How we perceive you, how evaluators and interviewers perceive you is certainly important. How you conduct yourself, really how you're able to express yourself in that format is important. However, after the interview, and your interview usually will become part of that graded system. You'll probably get some kind of scoring or general way of saying this was great or this was terrible. After that interview, you'll probably go back into another evaluation system. So now there may be some programs who think, you know what, as long as you made it this far, you're pretty much good. As long as you interview great, we're going to put you on that list and get you an invitation to this program. But the truth is many, many, many programs have far more applications and thus far more interviews than they really need. So there's probably going to go back to the drawing board and look again holistically at that application. So some programs will just look at that interview score and say, you know what, we're going to go off of these scores. And some programs are going to say, look, that's just one small component of this. We're going to put that component back with the rest of your application. Now that we know you a little bit, now we know that you showed up and you're a real person, we're going to look at that entire application one more time before we make our final decision. So you can probably guess by how many steps I laid out there and by how I really broke that down, that you may have as many as 3 or 4 or 10 or 20 people looking at your application from start to finish. And that's why there's a lot of gray zone in a lot of these answers that you'll hear. That's why you'll hear a lot of variety. That's why you'll hear one person giving you advice and say, well, you know, when I applied, I didn't have A, B, C, or D, and I still got in. And another person will say, I know I didn't get in because I didn't have A, B, C, or D. And you're like, well, A, they might not know why they got in, but B, there may be a lot of variety in the sort of criteria that goes into it. There is this myth that there are, you know, all of these applicants that are carbon copies of each other and they're separated by a hair. And the truth is nobody is that close to the other applicant. Everyone is very, very different. So some applicants are objectively strong and some applicants are objectively weak. But comparing an applicant head to head is really tough. We don't really have that sterile lab environment where we say, oh, look, here are my 2 identical cloned applicants, and one of them has a B in this class and one of them has a C in this class, so I will take that person with the B. It never works that way. It's always, well, this person has a little bit stronger grades. This person did some interesting things for their community. This person has had some interesting life experiences. This person had some great leadership. And you're constantly having to compare those different currencies, those different scales. So the application process is very complicated. We do use tools to try to quantify those things, rubrics and grading systems, and we really do want to exercise our program's mission and our program's values in that process. If we believe in diversity and equity and justice, we want our process to be embracing diversity. We want it to be equitable. We want it to be just. So there's a lot of things guiding it, but ultimately, you know, it does take a little bit of judgment, and that's why we use the time of these very time-strapped faculty members. I mean, there's plenty of other things that these faculty members could be doing for their current students, their future students, their careers, but we use their judgment, their wealth of experience to really apply that judgment to the applicants because it's that important. So you may be wondering, by the way, I brought up sort of values and mission, that kind of thing. Most programs will have that very clearly listed on their website. So it might not say, you know, if you're this, then you get this point, or if you've done that, it's worth this to us, or here's a list of things that will make your application great. But what they'll probably say is like, hey, we really value service here, or we really value, you know, a diverse learning experience, or we really value X, Y, and Z. And you can kind of read in those lines what they want their class to look like, you know, from a leadership standpoint, from a service standpoint, from the values that they hold really close to their hearts. So that's kind of the breakdown of how that application process works, looks like from the inside. And that really informs a lot of the answers to the questions that a lot of you sent in, both, you know, to the Pre-PAPals and also to me over the last however many months. I've been, you know, pretty vocal about, you know, wanting to help people in the admissions process. So just one second, I'm going to talk about a couple of those questions specifically. Already getting parched from talking too much. All right. So I kind of wanted to start by talking about some questions about the GPA and classes, and that comes up a lot. I know it's kind of just baked into our culture to really obsess over the GPA. That's just going to be a fact of the matter. It cares, or you care a lot about your GPA. We tend to weigh GPA heavily. We tend to judge a lot of people's academic ability and success on GPA, and because you know, it is a big component of those grades that you get, both as an undergrad and going forward. So a lot of people ask this question of what is a good GPA, and I'm not going to be able to answer that for you, of course. You're probably going to be able to find on every individual website for a program what their range of GPAs are, what their minimum GPA is, and what their average GPA is. So you should probably look at each of those numbers as insight into what that program, you know, does. So for instance, the minimum GPA is where you're going to get sliced off in that very first phase. Remember, I talked about that very first screening. If you're not meeting the minimum GPA, most programs will be able to filter you out. So if you're asking, well, can they fudge me? If you don't meet the minimum, the answer is probably no. You'd probably be better off spending that money elsewhere. Now, let's say you look at the average GPA and it's higher than your GPA. Well, based on how math works, how statistics works, that means a good amount of people were lower than the average and a good amount of people were higher than the average. And that average, that mean, or even the median, if they give you that, is somewhere in the middle of that group, right? And so if you're below the mean or below the median, it doesn't mean that you're eliminated. In fact, you may have a very good chance of getting in. What you should really do if they give you the information is look at that range. That'll be really telling. If somebody has a mean or median GPA of 3.5 at their program, but their range shows that they took people with a 2.8 all the way up to people with a 4.0, it doesn't tell you that, hey, if you've got a 2.8, you're in. But what it tells you is, wow, this program must look at other things too. And even if you have a relatively low GPA, then there's other things that can balance it out. Now, that person might have been an amazing individual. We don't know. They may have been way above your accomplishments and my accomplishments and everybody else's accomplishments. We don't know. But it tells you that it's not an automatic rejection and that there's always a way to balance out the GPA within that range. So below the minimum, probably not worth your time. Below the lowest range, it's going to be really hard for you to get in with that GPA. Below the mean or the median, probably still have a shot. Certainly if you're meeting the mean or median or are above it, you're probably not going to get eliminated. In fact, the GPA is not going to be the thing that makes or breaks you there. Then it's probably going to come down to other parts of your application. So I hope that discussion of GPA kind of helps you out a little bit. I know you wanted a number. Some of you just want that reassurance. Some of you just want to hear like, I nailed it. Yes, I can rest easy. I'll get more sleep tonight. I'm sorry. If you need more sleep, cut out caffeine before 4 p.m. I think that helps a lot. They say don't watch TV before bed. So those things will help you. I can't give you anything tonight that's going to get you more sleep. I can't guarantee you based on one piece of information that you're going to get in. So, take your GPA in that context. And I'll say a couple other things about that too. Yeah, so basically these questions come up kind of together. And so I don't know if I even answer them differently, but people will ask, how bad is a C, like getting a grade of C on your transcript, or when should I retake classes? And I love when people reach out to me. I often, really enjoy interacting with people, and I don't think I'm at a point in my career where I'm, too good to talk to anybody. So I really like answering questions directly from people. But what I don't really love is when people give me a very specific situation and then ask me to tell them what to do as it pertains to their grades and their GPA, because I don't have enough information to advise you normally. So first off, how bad is a C? Well, it's not great. All right. Most programs have a pretty high academic standard for their current students, meaning if you're a PA student in a program, often it's not D's get degrees around here. A lot of programs want their students to be making A's and B's throughout PA school. And as you probably know, PA school is a rigorous academic setting. So C's in PA school, depending on the program, might actually get someone on academic probation, for instance. C's might get people, kind of in trouble academically in PA school. So seeing C's on a transcript for someone who's not yet in PA school can be concerning to programs. So you may have to recalibrate sort of what you see as acceptable academically. However, you're talking right now to a guy who got C's in college. Not every class. I don't think that would have helped me out too much, but I had some C's on my transcript. I was 18, 19, 20. Life was tough, working jobs, all the other stuff that gets in the way. And frankly, getting blindsided by real academic rigor for the first time. Heck yeah, you might get a C or 2 on your transcript, or 5 or whatever. But really, it matters the context in which those grades exist. And so the same question of like, should I retake a class comes up a lot. Hey, I have a C in anatomy. Should I retake it? I can't answer that specifically. And so I really don't like to be put on the spot where I'm saying, yeah, go retake that. Here's what you should do when you look at your transcript, when you look at your entire sort of academic record heading into PA school. First of all, your science classes are pretty important. We know that science classes are often the precursor to the classes that we teach. Often the knowledge gained in science classes is applicable to the clinical concepts that we teach. And also we know that science classes are kind of hard. There's not a lot of fluff in a lot of the core science coursework that you take in college. So we often give a lot of weight to science classes, and especially those core ones, the prerequisites, of course, but also ones around that, in the periphery of that. the science and math courses that really sort of test your mettle as an academic student. Because remember, we're trying to figure out, yeah, we want to know, can you be a great PA? Can you be a clinician? Can you go out and take care of patients? But also, can you pass PA school? It's a rough 2 years. I don't want to admit people who are not going to make it through because then, we've let you down, you've let us down, and nobody wins in that situation. So when you look at your transcript, look, do I have a pattern of poor academic performance in really important courses? And if the answer to that is no, I have a 1 off or a 2 off or a 3 off, then you can take a little bit of a breath. That might not be where you should have all of your focus. However, if you think there is a pattern, or if you think, I'm looking realistically at myself and my GPA is kind of the weak spot here, then I need you to really assess mathematically what you can do about it. Because if you retake one course from a C to a B or a B to an A, it might not change your GPA much. And so I want you to calculate your GPA in a few different ways and figure out if retaking a course is actually going to change your GPA, or if retaking 5 courses is going to change your GPA. And if you can significantly bump your GPA, if you can move it around a little bit to the point where it's noticeably different, that might be where you spend your time. That might be where you spend your resources to make your application better. However, if retaking courses is not going to budget at all, if there's just no way, your GPA is just in cement, you've had 6 years of undergrad courses, it's just solid, like that thing is not moving, maybe you don't concentrate on retaking those courses. Maybe you concentrate on things that are easier to change, parts of your application that are easier to bolster. Now, if you're below the minimum GPA of every single PA program out there, that's tough, right? That's a totally different situation. You're not going to be able to get past the screening level in that situation. So I'm not really talking about you all if that applies to you. Also, people wonder, well, which course is better to retake if I'm retaking only one of them? It might not matter. I mean, the truth is like, I tend to notice the patterns on transcripts I look at. I tend to notice the trends. I tend to notice the things that pop up multiple times. I tend to notice the big picture, like, what was your GPA? I'll sometimes see, okay, what was the trend of your GPA? Oh, wow, freshman year was really rough, but you really kicked butt, sophomore, junior, senior year. Holy cow. You made honors by the time you're a junior. That's something that I can use to put context to your transcript. But if you're looking at really just shining up the tiniest parts of your transcript and not seeing a lot of change, you're not really changing the pattern, you're not really changing the GPA, you might want to think about how you can spend the time to make other parts of your application stronger. All right, I won't beat that concept to death because I think I've hit that a few different ways, but that's really what it is. Assess yourself holistically, assess yourself from a pattern standpoint, assess yourself mathematically, and figure out where you can turn the big dials, where you can move the big levers to make yourself more competitive. Because I don't want you to spend a lot of time and money to get only marginal gains, right? There's opportunity cost to that. You could spend that time, you could spend that money doing other things. All right. Okay, so that's sort of the GPA. I'm going to just pull some other questions up real quick while we're talking. That's sort of the GPA grades breakdown that we get a lot of those questions from. I'm going to move on from there, and if you all have more questions popping up in the chat, I'm sure we'll have a chance to really look at those. One thing that came up next as sort of an overarching topic was patient care experience. And I know that this thing comes up a lot. There was a lot of individual questions sent in. And so we'll kind of hit some big areas and then maybe double back and get some of those questions. Patient care experience is important, right? We kind of have decided as a PA profession that, a lot of what we do is an accelerated training process. And a lot of what we don't do that physicians do is postgraduate training. So we don't have a lot of residency programs for PAs after they're done with PA school. So you get PA school, you get it short, you get it fast, and then you're done and you're out there in the world for the most part. And now you're never done learning, but it's very helpful for somebody to come in with some built-in professionalism, some built-in experience, some built-in knowledge of what they're getting themselves into. And of course, if you have some skills as well, that's very valuable. So that's why we care about patient care experience. Now, often the question is, what kind of patient care experience is good, which one beats this one, is it rock, paper, scissors for different types of patient care experience? And the answer is, look, this is going to vary a lot. There's going to be a lot of different opinions. There's going to be a lot of subjectivity. There's going to be some biases involved. There's more than one faculty out there that's like, you know what, I had a really bad experience with, just pulling something out of the air here, an EMT one time. And so I don't know about these EMTs coming through, or respiratory therapists, or I'm not picking on these professions. I'm just using examples. But what I'm saying is that, remember, these are humans doing the evaluation. So everyone's going to have a different take. However, I do think what we all collectively look at when it comes to patient care experience is, has this shown me anything about the applicant? And has this shown the applicant enough about our world? So break that down into those two parts, right? What does this show me about the applicant? What kind of things have they done? What kind of responsibilities did they have when they did them? What kind of skill did that take? What kind of knowledge would they have acquired through that? And what does it show about their just general sort of toughness, work ethic, ability when it comes to working in what can be a very tough, unforgiving system of healthcare? So, for instance, if you were a patient care tech and mostly what you did was put blood pressure cuffs on the arms of patients in an outpatient office, took some vital signs, and then roomed the patients, that's not nothing. You probably learned about the functioning of an office. You probably had to be very professional dealing with those patients. You probably learned something around medical technology and terminology when it comes to sort of what's in the typical outpatient setting. However, that might be different than the exact same job title that worked on a intensive care unit at a trauma center. Maybe that person was doing a lot of different interactions with the patients. Maybe that person was routinely running or participating in the running of codes. Maybe that person was learning a lot about different labs that are sent, learning a lot about patient care in the acute setting, and was really diving in and building relationships with nurses and seeing how medical teams function, maybe even worked with PAs. That's going to be perceived a lot differently. So it's not just your job title. So I think let's knock that off right off the bat. It's not just your job title. It's not just where you work. You're probably going to need to describe all of these things. And if you filled out CASPA before, for those of you that are jumping on as your second or more time applying, well, you know that you don't just put a title and some hours down. You put dates, you put your supervisor, you put what you did. So you're going to have to really explain, no, what do you mean that you worked on a telemetry floor? What is that? What did you do? What happened there? What was your role? Yeah, I know you have an EMT license, but what did that mean? Were you driving a rig out, in pre-hospital setting, or were you working in an ER? And if so, what did you do in each of those settings? So that'll all factor in. Somebody did ask up here on one of these questions, which is better, quality or quantity? And I think I'll just defer kind of what I just said there. So if the quantity reaches a certain threshold where I feel like, okay, that's not just fly by night. There is a small quantity where I don't care what you did. If you said that you did surgery while skydiving from a cargo plane, if you did it for half an hour, I don't really believe that you did it. If you really know how to do something, you've done it over and over and over again. So I don't know what that threshold is. I'm not going to sit here and prescribe a number of hours, but you have to have shown that you've done something on a fairly regular basis. Full-time, typically better than part-time. Just if you have to compare the two, gun to my head, full-time usually means you had more immersion into that setting. So I want to see that you've done it. But once you've reached that threshold where I'm like, okay, this person didn't just sign up for the job, do the orientation, and quit the job and go home. Once I've known you've actually done it, then I really do think the quality matters more. So, again, 10,000 hours, checking blood pressure in the front of that office, not disparaging that job. It's great work. Awesome. We need everyone who does that job. But it may not matter as much as the person who had a diverse array of really intense experiences or had more responsibility. Maybe they were respiratory therapists and really managed vents on very sick patients for a very long time, or even for less time, but did so much more from a responsibility standpoint. That gives me a lot of insight into that person. Now, I mentioned about what that tells me about the applicant, but also what does it tell the applicant about the system? And the main thing I'll talk about there is, if you've worked with PAs, that's always great to see. So what does that tell me? Well, yeah, you've been out in the world, you've worked in these great settings, you've gained skills, you have knowledge, blah, 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 all the other stuff I just said. But if you also gained insight into the role of PAs, if you also understand not just the one job that you saw a PA do one time, but the variety of roles, how they act as a leader on the team, how they act as a follower on the team, how they act within the healthcare system. If you've been able to really get deep insight into the PA profession, that's a huge plus. If you've worked in a variety of settings, that's also a huge plus. I'm super biased. I'll be the first one to admit this. I'm an ICU PA. I love inpatient. I love acute stuff. I love all the stuff that's going to kill you because I want to help those patients, right? But there are just as many people who love the outpatient side. There's just as many people who love treating chronic diseases. There's just as many people who love all the other areas of medicine. So I don't necessarily want to say that inpatient's better than outpatient. It's not. But if you have a variety of experiences, that's going to do a few things for you. It makes you very informed. You're coming in eyes wide open. I know that this isn't just somebody who has a glamorized version because, U.S. News and World Report said it was the #1 job, or because, they saw a character on TV that was a PA one time. I want to know that they actually saw the variety of things that PAs do, but also you're more likely to have somebody reviewing your application who connects to what you did. So if you worked in an outpatient primary care office and you did hematology research and you worked on an ICU and you worked in an ER, I'm not saying you have to do all of those things, but just in this example of this person who had a crazy amount of jobs, think about that. If somebody is a primary care PA evaluating you, they're going to connect with you. If somebody's an ICU PA, they're going to connect with you. I'm not saying try to load up your application with a bunch of superficial junk to try to win people over. But what I'm saying is that the more experiences you've had, the more that somebody's going to say, you know what, this person seems to know what they're getting into. And also, it's pretty cool. I actually know how hard primary care is. I know how hard it is to work inpatient. This person's probably seen and done a lot. And if they've worked with PAs in those roles, they probably know what I do. So that's pretty cool to see. So when you think about patient care experience, I want you to think about it in those terms. Now, that's all the most ideal situation. Obviously, you all have real lives. You need to pay bills. You need to be able to probably study and work at the same time. You might have families you need to spend time with. So you need to do all of this stuff within the context of your lives. So while there's an ideal situation out there, there's probably more like dozens of ideal situations. And you don't have to have the ideal situation to get into PA school or to be a good PA. So do the best that you can in each of these areas, as realistic as it might be. If you have to take a higher paying job to pay your bills and keep a roof over your head, do that. And see what you can do in the margins to try to give yourself those additional exposure. If you can't work 40 hours a week because you're taking care of kids and also studying, or because you're doing other things, you have other responsibilities in life, then go for longevity. Stick with what you're doing and do it for longer. And really build those relationships up at your job. Really show that you have staying power. Maybe you'll even get recognized with an award or something like that. That tends to look really good too. So understand that I'm giving a lot of this advice, but you can be flexible and you can mold it to your life. And it's more about those concepts. That's why I don't say, be a scribe and an EMT and work 10,000 hours and you're good. And that doesn't help you. That only helps the EMTs and the scribes that work 10,000 hours. It doesn't help any of the rest of you. What I want you to do is hear the general concepts that I'm talking about, the things, the values, the information that those things look like on an application and what it tells me, and still tackling those in a creative way that works in your life. So that's my advice on that. I know there's a bunch of patient care experience. I'm just looking over here at some of the stuff you all sent in earlier ahead of time. And I think, a lot of people are asking the best way to get patient care experience in a short time. That's not really the point, right? Like, I don't want you to try to short circuit the system and try to get in and shortcut things. I want you to do the best for you, because what you get out of that patient care experience is you get time to figure out if this is even what you want. Healthcare is not the easiest thing in the world. And if you need time to experience that and figure out if you want to do this, that's valuable too. The last thing you want to do is to get down this path and figure out, oh, actually, I don't like some of this stuff. So take advantage of the time. Don't try to shortcut. Don't try to game the system or to try to crack the code. And then other people have asked about patient care experiences that are affected by COVID. It's going to change the game a little bit. And it certainly makes the job more risky. And those are not things that I take lightly. But unfortunately, people are still getting sick. And there is still a need, and fortunately, there is still a need and a demand for those of us who work in healthcare. So I just think you have to look a little bit harder. Again, this might change your timeline a little bit. Maybe you have circumstances where you can't work during COVID. That might just change your timeline a little bit. I don't have magical answers for you. This has been a crazy moving target. And so even advice that I would have given back in March of last year is not going to be relevant now. Things look way different in August than they do right now. So it's very tough to give you a one size fits all piece of advice there. But I would say that, there is still demand. It just might be in areas that you didn't think to look. So maybe widen your net a little bit, see what's out there. Understand that, you may do something and it won't be forever. So if you have to take something that's a little less desirable, keep the big picture in mind, keep the end goal in mind, but certainly keep yourself safe, keep your family safe, do what you have to do, to keep shelter and food and keep your family safe. So I'll kind of leave that there. I know that we'll have time to sort of circle back and get to some of those questions as well. So if you have more questions about patient care, you can be putting them in the chat. I don't know what the chat's doing right now, but I'll keep moving. And then unless there's anything pressing in the chat, I'll just keep it going and kind of give you my thoughts on different areas and keep that moving and come back to questions later.
Yeah, definitely. Sounds perfect. We'll circle back to those just like you said.
Great. All right. Should we talk about letters of recommendation? Let's talk about letters of recommendation. Cool. All right. So I have thoughts. I don't know if you've noticed, I have thoughts on stuff. So letters of recommendation. Okay. They're obviously necessary. I don't know. Are there programs that don't need letters of recommendation? I can't imagine that's the case. I need a letter of recommendation to go to the bathroom, I feel like these days. Letters of recommendation are just the currency by which we find out that you're not just a made up person and that you've actually existed. And there's at least a few other people in the world that think you're pretty great. And look, you can't please everyone out there, but if you have a few people in your corner fighting for you, you're probably doing okay in life. So I honestly find letters of recommendation to be one of the most stressful things as an applicant. I mean, I still need them. I'm out here trying to get grants and trying to get jobs and trying to, advance my academic career and all this stuff. So I'm in the same boat as you. I have that sense of anxiety in my chest about oh my gosh, not only how do I approach somebody who I don't, I look up to, but also how do I ask them to say nice things about me? So letters of recommendation are super stressful. I guess I'm just trying to say I empathize with you about that. So what do you need? Well, you need a variety of letters of recommendation. This is probably the tricky thing about PA applications because really you're living in this academic world, right? You're probably a undergrad student, or maybe you graduated a while ago, but you probably have something of an academic background to knock out those prerequisites. And then you probably have a healthcare existence too, but you probably don't have a lot of crossover between those two. So you're really having to juggle a lot of different worlds to compile this set of letters of recommendation. You might be like, well, yeah, they love me at my workplace, but I don't think any of these professors know me in that class of 500. So what do I do? So look, you probably need a variety of letters. And somebody asked, do I need one from this person, from that person? There's no absolutely gun to your head, you need one, unless the program application website, admissions website says you need to have a letter of recommendation from a blank. And some of them will. So you're likely to have them either suggest or require one from an academic source. So like a professor, a teacher, an academic advisor. Often committees are good at putting those together. Like academic committees will put together a joint letter for people sometimes. You're likely to need one from a colleague or coworker, usually a supervisor. And then the last category is more or less that arm's length sort of character person where it shouldn't really be like a family or family friend, but probably somebody who just knows you from some other realm of work, right? Maybe you've been volunteering at your church, or maybe you've had this involvement with this, health access organization, and the person that runs that knows you showed up every Saturday and work like heck to help your community, and you've been doing it for years. And they're like, oh yeah, love so-and-so coming in here and doing that. That might be that person that you get a letter of recommendation from. So, starting off academic stuff, yeah, it's tough. Some of us went to schools that were very big. I'm a USF bull. I don't know if I have any other bulls out there. South Florida, I really love that school, but I'll tell you, there was hundreds of us in those chemistry classes. There probably still are, if any of my Tampa people are out there. I don't think any of those professors knew me. However, I did take these really awesome public health classes where there was 10 of us in the room, and I really got to know my professor by participating in class. And, got to the point where I said, look, I'm not really here for public health. I want to get into healthcare, but everything you say in class is awesome. I love learning from you. Do you mind meeting after class sometime just to talk about your career? I'd love to hear more about that. And, I built a relationship with that professor, and they really appreciated the enthusiasm. It didn't take long. They're like, look, you're awesome in class. Your grades are good. And you care enough to talk about the rest of the stuff in the world, outside of class. That's a great person that, that I want to recommend, that I want to help out. So winning somebody over can be as simple as that. Anytime you're then approaching somebody for a letter of recommendation, you want to give them as much as you can to make their lives easier. Anytime you're asking someone for help, make it easy for them to help you. That goes across the board. So especially letters of recommendation. So if you're asking someone for a letter of recommendation, ask well ahead of the deadline. The last thing I want to do is do a favor for someone under pressure, under duress. So ask well ahead of the deadline. Tell them what it's for. Formally tell them, whether it's you're emailing them or writing them a letter or asking them in person, tell them what it's for and why it matters. Why do you want to do that thing that they're recommending you to do if it hasn't already come up? See, the thing about this is if you have a relationship with someone, it's probably already come up, but they really want to be able to refer to why this is a big deal, why this person is perfect for it. So you need to have already had that conversation, or at least have mentioned it, and then provide them with a copy of your CV or your resume so that they can speak to the other things you've done. There's nothing worse than a 1-paragraph letter of recommendation. It just doesn't seem sincere. It might be the most sincere paragraph, but it's just like, this person knows you really well and they had a paragraph to describe you. It just doesn't make as much sense. So if you give someone your CV, then they can say, look, yeah, they were awesome in class and they're a leader. They constantly encourage their classmates to participate and blah, blah, blah. And also, he volunteers on the weekends and he's got this job that he kicks butt in. And it looks like he had a poster in chemistry class, sent to a conference, some research that he did. So, that's all awesome stuff. And so they can really speak to you in multiple ways. And those things, those accolades, when they pop up in multiple letters of recommendation, are a lot easier to sort of latch onto and believe. So that's kind of that academic side. Coworkers are usually a little bit easier. They tend to spend a lot of time with you. They tend to know you. And so, it's a little bit easier to ask for letters of recommendation from a coworker, but all of those same things apply. Let them know why it's important. And please, they need to know that it's PA school. And if they put on their letter, graduate school or medical school or something like that, it seems insincere. So they need to know what they're writing you a letter for. So just make it easy on them. Don't let them make it dummy proof so that nobody can mess it up for you. And then, a lot of people are asking, well, should I get a letter of recommendation from a PA? Yeah, the answer is yes. I don't give you a lot of straight up answers, but that is one of them. The answer is yes, you should get a letter of recommendation from a PA. It's not a deal breaker for a lot of programs, but it certainly is an advantage in the programs that it's not required. And it just gives you a lot more sort of credibility in your understanding of the program. Now, this is becoming a big thing where people want to show up for like a shadowing session and then find that PA and be like, hey, remember me from that one time? I was there that one time. Can you recommend me? And that makes it really hard to write a letter. Remember, rule number 1 is make it easy for people to help you. So develop a relationship with a PA as soon as you can. This goes back to some of that patient care experience stuff I talked about, where if you work with PAs, this is much easier. A PA that wrote me a letter of recommendation way back when, I had only shadowed him like twice, but we worked for the same company. So he knew me as a coworker. And also he knew all kinds of people to ask about me to corroborate if he didn't feel like he had a great understanding of who I was. So it was very easy for him to recommend me because, yeah, I shadowed him a handful of times, but we had a history, we had a relationship, we had a lot of common ground, a lot of common colleagues. And so that's the type of person where even if they're not your best friend, that's fine. They need to be able to speak from an honest place about you, though. And again, provide them your CV, provide them interesting stuff about you. Tell them why this is your dream career, and if it's their job, we like to hear that too. Now I'll say, caution you, don't get it wrong if you tell them why it's your dream career. A lot of people will say like, oh, because, you've got the best work-life balance and your job's a breeze and, you have zero responsibility and you can't get sued. And they're like, yeah, tell my lawyer. but you don't want to get that wrong. You really want to have an honest relationship with that person so that you don't get that wrong, so that they tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then you still want to join us. And even with the good, the bad, and the ugly out there, it's still a pretty good deal. So I guess, ultimately develop relationships, make it easy to help you, be very honest. But, get that realness from those relationships, and it'll come through. It comes through in the letters when the people who really have relationships with the people that are writing their letters of recommendation. So I'm looking at some other questions here. I think that actually covered a lot of it. I know that, this kind of naturally branches into the shadowing thing. And right now, it's really tough to shadow people. I don't want to get into tons. I don't know how much time we have, but I know I've already been talking for a while. Shadowing is very, very tough right now. And so things like this, where, the pre-PAPals do virtual shadowing, that kind of stuff is great. I'll be very honest with you, and that, transparency and honesty is kind of my thing here. I don't know how programs are going to handle virtual shadowing. I didn't even know that was a thing until recently, until people started doing it. I'll say this past cycle, and I think I'm allowed to talk about past cycle because I think it's pretty much over now for our program, at least my role in it. We didn't handle virtual shadowing. Like, that wasn't a thing. As far as like my personal involvement was, if you shadowed a PA, you shadowed a PA. And if you did other things to learn about the PA profession, if you did stuff like showed up to every Pre-PAPals virtual session, that's great. You can put that in there. I mean, there's no rule. That's what I always think. It's so weird to, make things mutually exclusive, or it's in either or. Like, you can do all of this and it looks better. The more you do, the more you learn about the profession, the better. If you have a pre-PA club, great. If you're involved with that, great. If you do stuff like organize these virtual sessions yourselves and attend them, great. Those are all good things. But as far as like a one-for-one swap, that discussion probably didn't happen at a lot of programs. I mean, this stuff was happening, we were thrown into the fire with this last cycle. We were trying to figure out how to even make interviews happen. So a lot of this nuance didn't happen. I think it'll probably be a reality that will happen for us this upcoming cycle, where we're like, all right, look, if you didn't shadow by, April of 2020, then you just weren't ready. That it's a couple of months of COVID didn't mess you up. It was your planning, or you just weren't ready. Now we're to the point now where, like, okay, if you're looking at maybe a year where you were kind of taken out of the game, yeah, there's still a lot of people who got their shadowing in 2 years ago. There's a lot of reapplicants. There's a lot of that kind of stuff. So I don't think you're going to see people say it's all equal, but there may be certain concessions made, and that remains to be seen. I don't know. I'm happy to learn that along with you, and kind of after the fact, I might be able to share what I know about that. But I certainly, don't know how it's going to be handled. But the more things you do to show a strong familiarity with the profession, the better. And I encourage you to be your own salespeople. I encourage you to not minimize the fact that you're sitting here on a Wednesday night it's about 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and you're sitting here instead of having fun, listening to me talk about the profession. That's not worthless. Sell that dedication, sell that understanding, and do as much of these types of things as you can and build a body of work. And then you can deal with the shadowing thing. I know shadowing is a requirement for some programs. I don't know what to say about those programs. I think that's a little nitpicky, but that's what they say. That's their policy. I can't do anything about that. In those cases, you got to treat it like any other prereq. All right, you got to contact that program and say, look, I didn't face-to-face with a PA in the past year, but I did X, Y, and Z. Do I meet your minimum requirements? And then you just have to live with the answer. But at least right? If the answer is no, you don't meet our minimum requirements, cool. Pack your bags and move on to the next program. Don't spend your application money there. And if you do meet the requirements, great. And you just answer the question, and then you're good. And then you don't have to fret about it so much. So that's my take. I know that's a very weird, brief, cursory talk of shadowing. There's a lot more about shadowing that we should talk about. And I think when things get back to normal, my advice would be something like shadow everyone you can, shadow every day of the week, shadow every profession in every setting. But that's a really weird piece of advice to give right now. Where hospitals are shutting down, students and elective surgeries every other month and all kinds of other stuff. So it's just not realistic to tell you to do that. So we'll get back to shadowing, both in discussion and in real life, but just probably not for right now. Cool. Let's see. Well, I tell you what, there's 2 big sections left that I haven't talked about. That would be like personal statement type stuff and interview type stuff. And I think that those are 2 huge topics. But what I'll ask is, because the Pre-PAPals here have been monitoring the chat, if you want me to dive into those and keep ranting / monologuing about those, I'm happy to do it. If you want to take some questions based on your available time, we can do that too. I don't really care. I'm happy to do either one.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're okay, do you mind taking a few questions from the chat just over the topics that you've talked about so far?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So I don't want to ask specific questions because I know you said you don't know a lot about the candidates, so I'll try and make it more general. But Lorena had a good question earlier, and she was asking about the age of prereq. So a lot of people are reapplicants or they've been out of school for a little while. And I know programs have specific cutoff for prereq, whether it be like 7-year or 10-year or whatever. But do you think as long as you're within the cutoff, the age looks better or worse? So if you took it just last year, is it going to look better than being right at the cutoff of 10 years or?
Yeah, this is one where you guys care more about this than I do. I promise you. A lot of you guys will fret over your own applications and look at them under a microscope and dissect them way more than the typical evaluator will. It's not to say we don't care. It's just to say that, like, I don't think is a 5-year class and a 4-year class and a 3-year class, are they all equal? So what I would say is, as long as I meet the prerequisites, I'm good. As long as I don't have them expired, I'm going to keep pushing forward as an applicant. I think that there's probably a human being out there who says, I'd much rather have your prereqs be within the last 2 years. I'm sure that person exists. I don't know them. I'm sure they exist. But are you really going to retake classes for that person? Like, probably not, right? It goes back to that. Where are you going to spend your energy? Where are you going to spend your time? Retaking classes that are good, that are still good for you, that'll still get you where you want to go, because there's like a slice of people that might have some weird take on old classes, is probably not the way to go. And also remember, like, most of us, like, we're old and our stuff is in the rearview mirror too, as far as our education goes. So like a lot of our biases actually go more towards like, hey, it's cool, man. If you took biology in 2005, like, yeah, so did I. Sounds good, So again, as long as you're meeting the requirements, I think you just keep going. Spend that time and money doing something else to strengthen your application. And this is maybe a good time to say, don't forget how expensive, or I should I say how cheap it is to add additional programs onto your CASPA. Now, I don't say that to mean CASPA applications are cheap, because they're not. And the people who have followed me know that I'm like really big on lowering the cost of applications. But from a tuition standpoint, compared to retaking a course, you could probably apply to another 10 programs. So rather than shining up that prerequisite that's right up there against the edge of being too old, you could apply to like an extra 10 programs, and your chances of getting in shoot way up compared to like the handful of people that are going to be like, oh, thank gosh, you really had that class a little bit newer than I thought it was going to be. Like, think about where you can spend that money, and more programs really bumps up your probability of getting in.
Awesome. Very well said. I'm sure that resonates a lot with a lot of people and hopefully makes them feel a little bit better about their own application.
Yeah, a lot of you guys need to relax out there.
Oh, man. Yeah, preaching to the choir. But so kind of to piggyback off of that question, another class GPA question from Serena. She was asking about how much programs take into consideration whether you retake a class that you did poorly in. So this was something that I thought you spoke really well on in your press presentation. So if you could just kind of touch on that, like, are they actually going to see like, oh, she made a C in this class, she's retaking it and making A. So is that something that they're going to dissect the application, like see those 2 points, or is it just something like, oh, she took this class and made an A? So.
Yeah, it really depends. And again, it goes down to like, well, what am I worried about with this applicant? So the person with the 3.99 GPA that happened to like get a one-off C somewhere and then retook it. I'm like, you already impressed me. Your GPA is high. You're academically okay. The last thing I'm worried about with that applicant is that they're going to do poorly in PA school academically. Now, I may look at them critically for other reasons. I'm not saying they have a free pass. If they haven't had a lot of healthcare exposure, I might say, is this person like, done enough out there to know, and so that we know that they're ready for this. Maybe they've done, very little as far as service goes, and that's a nuanced topic that we can get into later on. But what I would say is that if you're in that high echelon of academic performance, you're just going to get less scrutiny. The lower you are down that sort of range of grades, the more I'm going to say, okay, what was the actual problem here? And then I'm going to look at exactly what happened. So as I get lower GPAs, my attention to the grades, my attention to the transcript is likely to increase. And that's where I'm going to really look at things. Now, if I see, yeah, you're right, you really messed up that fall semester freshman year, like that, rough. But here you went and you took, a bunch of other classes, and you retook some classes, and even with a full academic workload, you proved after the fact that you could take or that you could handle that course. That might change how I see your application. So again, this comes down to like, what can you actually change? And often it's not that person retaking it senior year as opposed to freshman year that is like who's asking that question, because they're just going to do what they're going to do. Like you did it, you tried your best, live with it. But it's usually that person who's like, okay, I graduated and now I'm wondering, do I retake classes, one-off classes again? Do I retake them at a community college? Is that going to look bad? Do I do a post-bac? Do I do all these things and so that's, again, where you have to really look at your application and say, honest to God, objectively, what's the weakest, what's the worst part of this? Is it that I just look like I can't really have a full academic workload? And if so, we might need to see something that shows that you can handle PA school, right? That you can handle it all together. Now that might mean, wow, look at this person. They were working a full-time job, and then they took organic chemistry or retook organic chemistry and aced it. And with that full-time job, then they took organic 2 and aced it, even after they failed it back, 10 years ago. It's the context, and I truly do look to give people the benefit of the doubt when I see that the rest of their application is strong, that the more recent stuff they've done is encouraging, that they have values and mission that matches me and the program. Those are the people that I look for. Okay, what was really going on here? So that's why I say at some point, you got to step away from the GPA conversation and say, okay, what else can I do for this application? Because if you went out and were a pillar of your community and increased health access for everyone in your community and did these amazing things, and the local newspaper covered you, and oh, by the way, you also were, taking some class, like I'm going to look for every reason to give you the benefit of the doubt on your academics, because I want that person in my program. I'm looking holistically. I want the person that's service oriented in that person. So let me say, you know what? Yeah, that GPA is lower, but actually the stuff they did in the past couple of years was fantastic. I actually think this person's going to do fine. I think they're going to do fine academically in the PA program. So that's how I approach it. That was a really sprawling answer. I know that a lot of people want that yes or no, but the truth is retake it if it's the worst part of your application, if it's going to make a big impact, or if you can just show that, like, look, I know that I can do better than that, and I think that this will really illustrate my academic preparedness, then yeah, go for it. I did mention the post-bac thing, and I think one of the questions someone sent in to you all was, should I take a post-bac or a master's? That's a super tough question. It's going to really depend on the applicant again, but I'll tell you this. If your prereqs and your core stuff was the problem, was very problematic, a post-bac might be the way to go. Now, they're expensive, and they're time consuming, and they're basically like being a full-time student again. And so in some ways that's good. That shows me, wow, if you really ace the post-bac program, you probably can handle a course load. But on the other hand, they're expensive and time consuming, and that's not what everyone has. So if your core stuff is not the problem, maybe a post-bac's not going to help you. And some people ask, should I take a master's program? Only if you think that master's program is going to give you skills and it's going to help you in a way that you want anyways. I would hate to see someone spend the type of graduate tuition dollars and the type of hard work to get a master's degree that they don't want, that's not going to help them in any way, just because they think it's going to spruce up the transcript. Master's degrees are great. If you want to get a master's in public health, do it, but do it because you want the master's in public health, not because you think it's going to look good.
Very well said. And I think that seems to be a common theme with a lot of these questions is that the context is so important. So whether it be letter of record or PCE or whatever, it takes a lot of introspection into like your own application to see what your own strengths and weaknesses are.
And that's why I hate when people ask me, well, what were your stats, or what is that, what were your stats when you got in, or they ask a recent graduate that or something like that. Does it matter? You're not that person. The stats aren't going to matter. I already can tell you the average is across the program, so if you fall sort of within the acceptable range. But like, you're your own person. It's very hard to compare yourself. So yeah, the context matters, and it does. You're right. That real honest evaluation. And honestly, like, if you just trust someone, and I am not here to endorse pre-PA coaches for paid pre-PA coaches. I don't think that they're worth it. I don't think that they're doing a service to the profession at large. So I will say, I don't want you to just pay someone to look at your transcript, but if there's someone you trust in your life, just say, hey, what would you look at? What do you think is the best thing about me? What do you think is the worst thing about me? What do you think I need to work on from a professional standpoint? And somebody with a little working knowledge of the profession, if you have a coworker that's a PA, something like that, somebody might be able to just give you an honest assessment. And again, vet who's giving you advice. Know that person, know their experience, know where they're coming from. But sometimes you do need an outside perspective. Often you just need to be realistic with yourself and say, like, yeah, I wish my GPA was higher. Am I going to be able to change it? Probably not. Ooh, I really can change, though. I really can start to have a trend of service. I really can, engage my community a little bit more. I really can get more work experience. And that might be the route to go.
Definitely. I can't agree with you more. And that's another one thing that I love that you always reiterate is the importance of vetting your information. Because there's a lot of people out there that are going to try and give you information based off of themselves, and it may not apply to you. I think one of the biggest examples of this that I see and hear about all the time through this organization is people will always jump on forums and see like people talking about like, well, yeah, I had 4.0, 10,000 hours, blah, 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 but I didn't get in. It's like, you compare yourself to that guy, of course you're not going to apply. That's too much anxiety to take on yourself. So well said. I think you do an amazing job of just kind of talking about everything. So I don't want to be redundant in any of the questions that I ask you. So if this is a good time for you to move on, I think you did a good job of answering all the questions we had.
Okay, yeah, I can keep talking about other stuff and pop back in. I like talking to you guys. So
thank you. Yeah, likewise.
Cool. All right. What are we talking about here? So personal statements. We want to talk about that for a second. Personal statements are a large part of your application, and they're a unique part of your application. A lot of the rest of this application is, plugging information into very rigid spots in a document, a PDF. Honestly, it just comes out as a PDF for a lot of us. And so, it can be really static. It can be really sterile. It can, honestly, it can be kind of boring. The personal statement is the most flavor in the entire application. And so you really want to look at it as an opportunity. I think a lot of people look at it as a chore, as a drag, as the hardest part of their application to tackle. And those things might be true. It might be hard to talk about yourself, but it's a huge opportunity. And if you don't look at it as an opportunity, you're probably going to be missing out on some of that value. And so what do I mean by that? Look at it as an opportunity. Don't use this as a place to be redundant. I've said this in previous talks. I'll say it again. I really don't repeat myself unless it's important. Don't make your personal statement a narrative version of your resume. And by that, I mean, don't use that valuable real estate, that valuable word count to just tell me what I just read right above the personal statement in your work history, your academic history, your extracurriculars, your service record. I just read that. I looked at it. Like, I didn't just skim it. So I really don't like when someone does that, not because it's a waste of my time, and it kind of is as a reviewer. I'm like, yeah, I know you did the whole project. I read about it. There's a whole description, a narrative description of it, but also because you've lost out on an opportunity to show me in that one space who you are as a person. And so a good personal statement will avoid the redundancy of the resume, but will give it a lot of context as to who you are. And I know that a lot of people think that it's the time to sort of be defensive, to sort of explain away the flaws in your application. And I want you to resist the urge to do that. Often that backfires unless you're a very, very skilled persuasive writer. Highlighting your flaws comes off as defensive. It comes off as, hey, just highlighting your flaws. And I actually wasn't even going to think of it. Like, I guess you kind of do have a low GPA now that I look at it. Or, wow, yeah, you really did have a bad freshman year. I didn't notice that. But now that you mentioned it in this personal statement, I'm not so sure about your academics. So avoid that urge unless there is something absolutely outstanding that gives context to those things. So, and I don't mean to demean any of this stuff, but a relatively distant relative dying is usually not going to fit the bill as far as providing meaningful context to you. And I don't mean, everyone's relationships are different, so I'm not going to try to plug in this relative. I'm just saying there's a lot of people that experience things that are meaningful to them, mean a lot to them, but don't necessarily impact their function in their lives very much. And so bringing those up might not help as much as saying, like, look, yeah, I actually was a refugee coming from a war zone during this period of time. That is very impactful. That gives a lot of context. That is, I mean, paradigm shifting, right? Like, if I'm like, I don't know, man, this person wasn't super engaged in their community. This person didn't have a very strong work history. And then you find out, like, oh no, I was, battling cancer myself. I was very, very ill and nearly died. Whoa, like, that is a paradigm shifter. So if you have something that will shift the paradigm of your application, you can include it in there. It does not mean to pick the biggest tragedy you can find and make that the focal point of your personal statement. What I would say from a positive standpoint is, if you're going to pick something, tell me the story of who you are and tell me why I really want you in the program. So often that's not, talking about the family member that died, or talking about, the really cool experience you had as a pre-PA or shadowing a PA or something like that. I don't glean a lot of insight into who you are by the cool experiences you had. I glean a lot of insight by knowing situations you were in which you made very large decisions, knowing situations in which you acted dynamically, or a body of work that's otherwise not expressed in your resume itself. I know this is all sounding very vague and abstract, and that's kind of the point. So I can't tell you what to write about, right? Because I don't know you. I can tell you, though, that being honest about your lived experience can be very beneficial. I mentored someone who had a very interesting life experience and gained a lot of insight from it. So she was able to talk about her experience as a patient and how her experience as a Black woman overlaid that experience, and how she internalized that and her goals moving forward, and how she wants to impact healthcare. That's a multifaceted, deep, introspective view of a situation, and it's expressed in a way that gives me deep insight into that person and answers that question of, so what are you going to bring to my program? What are you going to bring to the profession? And if you can do all of that at the same time, that is your sweet spot. You cannot steal anyone's life story. You can't steal anyone's lived experience. But that's just an example of, it gave context. And without saying so, I start looking at that person's application differently. Without saying, I got really bad grades because, I had to raise a family member from infancy. That's not what you say, right? But by talking about your lived experience, I say, wow, like, you did all of this academically while you were dealing with that. You did all this work while you were dealing with that. You didn't say that, but I'm a smart person. I can figure that out. That is kind of like the perfect sort of personal statement, where it's using the story of your life to give insight. The most interesting thing is not that situation you were in. The most interesting thing is what you took away from it, how you internalized it, and then how it motivated you, and to do what specifically. And I think if you can answer those questions in one cohesive way, you're going to nail the personal statement. What does that mean? That means you need to sit down and talk about introspection. You need to really just think about yourself and who you are and why you are the way you are and what you want the world to see about you and what you're going to do with that. there is something special in you. I'm not trying to be cheesy and say everyone is special, but there is something in you that has you sitting here tonight, listening to this PowerPoint, this YouTube channel, when you could be watching something on Netflix. Why are you here? What are you going to do with it? If you can answer that in a very interesting way, then you've nailed it. Pitfalls to avoid. I think some of you know some of my pet peeves already. Well, don't do that whole resume rundown, right? Don't get defensive. I've already said these things. I don't think that you should, trying to think of a nice way to say this, be very careful in using healthcare experiences to frame why you want to go into healthcare. Often, people with less healthcare experience or fewer years in the healthcare system are much more profoundly impacted by each of their healthcare experiences than somebody who's been in it a long time. So frequently, when someone is shadowing or has their first job in healthcare, or maybe is a student in another capacity, they'll have an experience that they find to be very profound. But often what they're experiencing is the novelty of that situation. So yeah, you saw something really crazy in the ICU or in the ER or as, on that rig, and it might have had a big impact on you. But simply relaying that situation to me doesn't give me that insight into you. And also, I hate to say it, I don't find it that interesting. Most of the faculty members that are evaluating your application have long and storied healthcare careers. They've done a lot. They've seen a lot. It's not to say that we're jaded and we're not impressed by anything, but what it means is that intro about the old lady who was really sick is not as eye-catching as you might think it is. Because remember, we do this all day, every day, and have for years. And also, you're really putting yourself out there. What if you screw up a detail? What if you really fumble the medical terminology? What if you say something that just doesn't make sense clinically? I mean, we're going to pick up on that before you do, right? And so you kind of put yourself out there at a weird risk. So I don't often love the, here was a crazy healthcare experience I had, and this is why I want to be a PA thing. And so I tend to not like that framing device. Count that double for framing devices that also might rub me the wrong way in a different context, i.e. medical mission trips, where you went and did something with a population of people that are foreign to you, and you did something that you weren't trained to do, or you participated in a capacity that was outside your scope of practice. If you out yourself as somebody who goes into other communities and does things that are irresponsible because they are not American or they're not white, then that is something that, personally offends me on behalf of those people, but will, show a certain level of lack of insight. And so I know that seems really specific and nitpicky, but you would be shocked at how many people, go and do things as students that they honestly shouldn't be doing. They can get away with it because there's fewer regulation and regulating structures in place wherever they happen to be, and because they're empowered by people in charge in those situations. But it doesn't reflect well on your judgment. So remember, if you're out there, do something to serve your community, do something to serve other communities, but don't take advantage of the fact that a particular community might not know your qualifications. Always be humble, always be respectful of sort of the autonomy of other human beings. And truly every person on the planet deserves the highest extent of healthcare, the highest level of healthcare. So that's a side rant. Man, I should probably not veer off into that. But I really do think that, it can be very tempting in situations to highlight the coolness that you see out there in the world and forget that A, that's a real person, and B, it's not telling me about you. I really want to know about you. And so those are kind of my pet peeves, my pitfalls on personal statements. Oh yeah, and I guess we have to get into this a little bit. So what happens after you write that personal statement? Well, you need to get this thing edited, right? You cannot turn in a personal statement that's not polished. You cannot turn in a personal statement that is full of typos, grammatical errors, you name it. I mean, anything, misspellings, like anything that's going to jump off the page. But also, you want a second set of eyes to tell you, like, hey, does this flow? Does this make sense? Did this sentence even make sense? You know what I'm talking about? Is this just awkward and clunky wording? And here's where we get back into that conversation about people who make money in the pre-PA world. And I should say make money off of the pre-PA world. you're going to be very tempted to give your personal statement to somebody who's charging you a fairly good hourly rate to edit your personal statement because they're connected to the PA profession. Maybe they're a PA, maybe they're a PA student, often they're a new grad. Don't forget that most people, just because by being virtues of PAs, don't have deep insight into the PA admissions process. Most PAs got into one PA program, got into one cycle of PA programs, went to that program, graduated, and that's as far as they know about the process, right? So, that does not make them admissions experts. It doesn't make them experts on the profession, and it certainly does not make them expert editors. And you guys should be spending your money on other things. If you're paying someone $150 to edit your personal statement, and I've seen prices go way higher than that, what is that, 3 or 4 programs you could have applied to, extra programs, which are going to matter way more than some non-editor taking your money. So what do you do instead? Well, I think it's okay to have 1 or 2 editors, but be careful about having too many cooks in the kitchen. So you can have 10 people look at your essay, give you 10 types of feedback on it, and you're probably going to end up with Frankenstein's monster because there's just going to be too many differing opinions and you're going to go a bunch of different directions and it's going to be a mess. So I always try to limit my feedback. I try to use 1 editor at a time, and I try not to really use more than 2 editors. And here's how you can play it as this pre-PA who's not trying to send their money down the toilet to someone who's not necessarily going to help you as much as they claim to. Find 1 person in your life who is a talented writer or who understands writing or who understands the English language really well. They don't have to have anything to do with healthcare. They can be a copywriter at a newspaper who's now retired, and you mow their lawn and they edit your essay. Somebody who's just peripherally associated with you who knows words. I use my mom all the time still. I'm a grown man. I get paid to write. I still use my mom as an editor. Why? She has nothing to do with healthcare. She's a smart lady, and she's also an English teacher for 30 years and a talented writer and a very good critic and a very good editor. So I use her for those reasons. I don't care if she doesn't know the medical terminology. That's not the point. She'll tell me when something doesn't sound right. She'll catch errors. She'll tell me when I'm clunky and don't make sense and I'm just, writing things in an awkward fashion. And so that is 90% of the editing right there. Now, you're not a medical person as an applicant necessarily. Maybe you are, but you're probably not a highly experienced PA if you're applying for PA school. And so if you use a non-medical editor, you probably still want someone to just lay eyes on it as a secondary, just to say, like, you know what? I think that this is okay from a medical standpoint, from a clinical standpoint, from the insight into the profession standpoint. Because remember, in your essay, you're probably going to be telling people why you want to be a PA. So you probably want someone familiar with the profession to just say, yeah, that didn't sound crazy. That made sense. Like, yeah, no, that sounds right on. It sounds like you know what you're talking about. Now, that person can be a regular old PA who's been working at the hospital near your house for 10 years or somebody you shadowed. That person doesn't need to claim to be an editor, right? So you're using 2 different people for 2 different purposes. You find someone who you think is the strongest with the English language you can possibly find. You get them to help you edit it. And then you find somebody who knows something about the PA profession and you just say, hey, look, just a little bit of your time. Do you mind reading this and telling me if this sounds crazy or if this would really turn off a practicing PA for some reason? Just check my blind spots here. And usually with that connection, that overlay, you'll be able to, kind of cover all your bases for free and relatively quickly. And then I would stop. And I mean, you want this thing polished, but you don't want to overdo it. Most people can get by with that. So that's I'll stop there and see if there's any questions as well. And then if not, we can keep moving on. Or I don't even know. It's 8:30 on the East Coast, so I don't know how long we're wrapping this up. But happy to do any of the above.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing it fine on time. We just want to make sure we're being respectful of your time.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So how many more topics did you want to talk about after this, out of curiosity?
I just had I guess the interview, but that's pretty much it.
Okay, definitely. So why don't we, if you're okay, go ahead and do that, and then we'll kind of come back and give you all the questions that we have at once. Does that sound good?
Sweet. Okay. And if people are angry at me for any of the stuff I just said, please tell me that too, because I love when they hear that.
Yeah, definitely. You got it.
Awesome. All right. All right. So I guess we'll talk about interviews, and here's the truth. I hope all of you, I'm gonna plug my Instagram for a second. Follow me on Twitter or Instagram after this. Because what I'm going to do is circle back a little bit closer to the application cycle and talk more about things like personal statements. I'll give you a whole talk on personal statements. I'll do a whole talk on interviews. And frankly, you're not going to be interviewing tomorrow or next month. You're not going to be interviewing for a while, just because of the purpose of this, the makeup of the cycle, right? So you're going to apply sometime in the spring or summer, and then you're going to interview sometime after that. So what I'm saying is we should probably talk more about this closer to when interviews happen. But nonetheless, we're all here. So give you your time's worth here. So I think the main thing that you need to understand is that interviews are not a way to determine who's going to be a good PA in a vacuum. Right? Interviews are a tool that we use as part of the entire application process to figure out who you are as a person. And frankly, interviews rarely weed out huge numbers of people. So interviews are they're very stressful, right? So they're very tense. You get really worked up and your palms are sweaty, and you know, before COVID, you put on your nicest suit or whatever you had, and you showed up. Sometimes you drove or flew a really long way. So there's all this pressure. What I'm saying is there's a build up to interviews. Well, you should know that for the most part, people don't sync themselves at interviews. Interviews are great at weeding out people who have personalities or disorders of personalities that are just not conducive to the medical environment. So some people blow it in the interview, and some people, frankly, we just find out who they are in the interview. And that's the main purpose of the interview, to be honest. It's very hard to differentiate 10 top tier candidates who all interview pretty good. That you've all passed at that point. So what you want to do is really avoid blowing it. And what you want to do is use it as an opportunity to highlight areas, much like the personal statement, that would not have highlighted or been highlighted in your application. Now, a lot of interviews now are using like the multiple mini interviews where you don't actually control the conversation at all. You're put in a situation you need to exercise judgment. And some are still in a traditional interview fashion where you can go in and you might be asked questions, but you can often steer that. They're open-ended questions. You can sort of bring a lot to the table. But the biggest way to not blow this, or I guess the easiest way to blow this, is by being unprofessional, by being rude, by exhibiting very, very poor communication skills, or by doing something else that's crazy. And really, people find interesting ways to blow their interview. They're rude to people that they see as not important in the interview process, like the people showing them around the building, or the people checking them in, or somebody in the elevator that they didn't realize was a faculty member and they thought was a student interviewing there because they look kind of young. But often, if you're sort of always on your best behavior, if you really concentrate on controlling your anxiety and using your communication skills, you're going to be fine. And then from that point, you can build on that to fine tune your interview. I do think that for most of us, we're nervous if we haven't done something before. And we're especially nervous in high stakes situations, and especially in social situations, myself included. And all these YouTube videos make it seem like I love to talk, but I get super nervous in those social situations too. And one way to deal with that is to practice and to rehearse. And it's not to become a robot. I don't want you to memorize scripts, because people who come off as overly rehearsed and robotic are off-putting. But if you've rehearsed things, then you won't be caught off guard, and you'll feel confident in your ability. Even if that same question doesn't come up, even if the same conversation that you practice doesn't come up, you'll know deep down inside you that I can do this. I've practiced. I have a foundation I can fall back on. So your anxiety level will just be inherently lower, and your performance will be inherently higher. So if you can practice interviews, you can practice a mock interview with anybody. I know that, again, I know that there's a whole industry out there, and I'm not pushing business their way because I think often these are people who are not deserving of the money that they are taking from pre-PA students. But I would say that you can set up a mock interview, create questions for yourself, give them to someone, mix them up, trade questions with a friend who's also trying to apply, something like that, and just have that person just give you questions in an order you don't expect, in a context you don't expect, put a little pressure on yourself. I don't know if we're still going to be doing virtual interviews, but if you are, do it virtually. Like put the bright light in your face, put your suit on, and sit in front of the computer and practice that way. Even if it's your roommate, make them pretend like they're on the other side of the computer. Really simulate the stress and the pressure of it. Really simulate the unpredictability of it, and that will really help you. I know that there's a lot of people that sort of advocate for preparing for specific MMI questions. You can do that. I don't know if you've caught this vibe from me. I much prefer to be natural and authentic and really give people, you know, who I am and not feel very prepared. And I think that that comes off better for me. And I also don't want to pretend that I'm something I'm not, because I don't want a program to take me thinking that I'm one way and then I turn out to be a different way, and you know they didn't really like the person that I actually was. I'd rather have, you know, 5 programs reject me and go to the 1 or the 2 that are like, I like this guy's vibe, you know, he's a little bit weird but I like it. So I tend to go more towards authenticity, and I think that works for me. Other people are like, ooh, I feel like I'm an acquired taste. I feel like I need to be on my best behavior. I really want to have a foundation. And so maybe practicing some of those MMI questions are useful to you. And when I say those MMI, those multiple interviews, those mini multiple interviews, they tend to be stuff about your judgment. They tend to be stuff about your ethics. They tend to be stuff about how you view major issues in the world. So if you don't know those things deep down in your heart, think about them ahead of time. If you know, for instance, that a program is going to give you 14 interviews in a day or 8 interviews in a day, you know that they're going to be throwing some stuff at you. So ask yourself, how do I feel about that? What does integrity mean to me? All of these things. And nobody's going to sit down and ask you, what does integrity mean to you? But they might put you in a situation where you really have to explain your values, and just be prepared for that kind of thing. I can't really give you more specific insight because purposefully we don't release our questions ahead of time, certainly not at my program, but most programs don't. And we change them all the time because obviously, you know, people leaving the interview might know what they are after they've just answered them. So yeah, we change them up. So you can't prepare specifically, but you can prepare yourself physically and mentally for the interview environment. So simulate it as much as you can. You can prepare yourself for the type of content that will be coming up. And don't miss the softballs. Oh man, don't miss the softballs. I mean, it's hard to talk about how you would deal with, you know, a coworker's alcoholism or something. I don't know, I'm just making up one of these sort of like MMI type questions. People are always asking that kind of stuff. But what about, don't miss the softball, right? Like, don't miss the why do you want to be a PA? Don't miss the strengths and weaknesses. Don't miss that kind of stuff. Man, if you can't tell you the program you want to go to, why you want to be a PA, woof. Like, wondering about that. So learn about the program, learn about the profession, learn about yourself, you know, and have those answers ready to go. Again, don't overly rehearse them, but man, know what you're going to say. Because it would stink if you like really ace all of these like high level ethics questions and you prove you're this person of value and character, and then you blank when they ask you why you want to be a PA. That would be, you know, that would be pretty bad. So so don't do that. And what else did people ask about interviews? So let's see. Yeah, different interview styles. I mean, they're all over the place now. A lot of people are doing the multiple minis. A lot of people are doing traditional. A lot of people are doing virtual. A lot of people are doing in person. This upcoming cycle, who knows? We will see. I don't know if they're going to be virtual or not. If they're virtual, here's some practical advice for you. If your interviews are virtual, I want you to dress professionally. I want you to eat a good breakfast beforehand. I want you to drink coffee or whatever is your thing. I want you to prepare like you're about to run out the door and drive to an interview. Then I want you to sit down in front of your computer, and before you even hit the power button, before you even connect, I want you to pretend mentally that you have just walked into the lobby of the PA program that you want to attend.
And I want you to be professional from that point all the way through until you shut your computer at the very end, go to your bedroom, take your suit off, and end the process. If you are breaking character, your professionalism in between every interview, if you are breaking when you think the other person has signed off, you run a very, very, very high risk of being on camera and mic'd up and coming off as very insincere or phony. If you're having an interaction with someone and you think you got disconnected and you flip over your computer and start swearing and it turns out you didn't get disconnected, you probably just blew the interview. Even if you just seem one way, and then as soon as the interview comes to a close, you seem a different way, but you're still on camera, that just comes off as phony. And you can probably guess where I'm getting this insight from. I really don't want you to, in the margins of the interview, appear to be anything you're not. I want you to be professional throughout, just like you would be professional throughout if you were there in person. If you went to the bathroom, you'd act professionally in the bathroom, right? If you were on the elevator, you'd act professionally on the elevator. So when you're in virtual waiting rooms, when you're on a virtual interview, when you think the interviewer has left the channel, again, just keep it strict and professional until you shut your computer, turn it off, get up and change your clothes. And if you can keep that mentally going, break for lunch, go and get some lunch, whatever. But you know what I mean? If you can keep that going in between all the little down times, you will not blow it in the margins. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Just give my voice a rest for a second. But if you have more questions about interviews, we can talk about it. I think that a lot of people are probably more worried about the application now, so I'll stop on the interview part. But why don't we hear some questions that you have generally? Any of the above topics or even stuff I haven't covered are totally fine by me.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and I know we've probably gone a little bit over on time, and I don't want to keep you here forever, so we'll just do a few to keep things as
yeah. Don't worry about me. I'm good. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So first of all, unfortunately, no negative feedback, no criticism of you yet. So I'm sure you were looking forward to that.
There'll be one.
So one interesting thing is I know you put a lot of emphasis on the personal statement, and that's one of the things that you said really sets you apart as a candidate. So somebody was asking, when is the personal statement taken in consideration? Like at what point when they're evaluating you? Is this like after the gatekeepers, like the big GPA that they look at, or do they look at prior so that they can evaluate that, something they look back at? So when does that come into play?
Yeah, no, I mean, great question. I think you guys are already tuning in to sort of like there's a process here. Yeah. And that's the right way to ask those questions. So, usually that personal statement is part of your overall application. So when CASPA ships it out, they tend to ship it out as just plugged into that whole big file. So it doesn't come separately. It doesn't come after the fact. However, and I'll speak broadly, and I absolutely can't speak for every program, it's very unlikely that an application screener looks at it. Now, if it's laced with profanity or something and it just jumps out and they're like, oh, wait, I wasn't even going to read this, but what the heck is going on? Then maybe, yeah, you're probably going to get that eliminated. But for the most part, the screening process is going to look for those big things. Did you meet the minimums? And the personal statement's probably not going to come into play at that stage. However, I would say any time from when that very first faculty evaluator or the very first person that is applying any kind of judgment to it, anybody who's applying any subjectivity to it looks at it, personal statement's totally within play. So certainly that's before the interview. And then, usually it just kind of follows you. It's tacked on everywhere you go. It's accessible for everyone that looks at your CASPA application. So even after the interview, if someone's like, ooh, I don't know, we're really trying to get down to the wire here, then, that's still into consideration. So anytime from the minute you submit it to CASPA, it's technically in play. Screeners probably not looking at it. Initial evaluators, definitely. Final evaluations, I would, just personally. I care about that. Like if I'm like, wow, this person, everyone seemed to like him at the interview. I wonder what they'd say about themselves. Let me see what this personal statement looks like. Also, some programs, you may notice, want a little bit of a writing sample at that interview stage. And so even if I didn't initially interview you or initially evaluate you, but I have now 2 pieces of writing, it's very interesting to compare those sometimes. So that might be another stage where it comes into play.
Awesome. And so that definitely puts a lot of emphasis on the personal statement, as it should, because it's very important, which might be kind of like a little nerve-wracking for a lot of people. But honestly, it seems like a great thing, because that is your one chance to be yourself on paper, right? Everything else is just numbers and statistics they're looking at. So
yeah, and I mean, don't build up too much pressure to the point where you're paralyzed by that. I mean, the truth is there's not a bunch of Hemingways applying with you. Like, these are not going to be the most beautifully written essays, and if you can't pull that off, you're just at the bottom of the barrel. The truth is most people in healthcare are like just okay writers, and so there's probably going to be, it's important. It gives a lot of flavor, but don't think that if it's not a masterpiece, you're doomed. I don't want people to get so wrapped up in their own heads. A lot of them are just mediocre. And you know what? Those people are in PA school. So, do your absolute best. There's nothing stopping you from writing a great essay, but don't get paralyzed by the expectations of it.
Awesome. And kind of moving into the interview process, this is a little bit more of a specific question, but I feel like we can group it into the overall general topic of disabilities. So somebody was asking, Jonathan was asking, he has a speech impediment, and he wonders is that going to put him at a disadvantage when he's going into an interview, when he needs to speak to somebody directly?
Yeah, I mean, Jonathan, most of the people you interview with are healthcare providers that spend most of their days understanding the human body and the human mind and how we're all different and how we all have our own things that we struggle with, that we have overcome. So that's a long-winded way of saying it absolutely shouldn't stop you. I think that if anything, if somebody looks poorly upon you for that, then you might not want to be in their program. And so I would say barrel straight ahead, keep doing what you're doing. I would also say, and this is just my personal advice, you can take it or leave it, I would feel zero obligation to explain yourself if that's part. I don't know how you interact with the world, or if that's something that you would do anyways, but I say no. You walk in there, you do your absolute best, you be as likable as you possibly can, you answer as genuinely as you can, and how you communicate is how you communicate, and that's who you are. And so no, let the closed-minded, short-sighted programs reveal themselves to you. So if somebody has a problem with it, you don't want them. Trust me. So you want the program that is full of people who are like, I see the value of the person. I'm not stuck on, superficial stuff. So yeah, just keep doing what you're doing. Don't even think twice about it.
Yeah, we couldn't agree with you more. That's so well said. So this question is kind of a little bit about something that you spoke on before, but there were a lot of people that re-asked it and, kind of upvoted it. So Shayla was asking, how much do PA programs take the responsibilities of collegiate athletes into consideration during the application process?
Ooh, a lot of collegiate athletes in the chat that upvoted.
Yeah, I know.
I'll tell you this. I mean, I think that we have learned that people who are collegiate athletes have a lot of qualities that translate very well to healthcare. Not just being fit, but I mean, what it takes to be an athlete is a long list of admirable qualities typically. Some of you are blessed with natural athletic ability, and more power to you. A lot of you worked very, very hard, had persistence and grit and dedication and discipline. A lot of you included teamwork in that. A lot of you were mentors and mentees along your collegiate athletic careers. These are all things that we want in the PA profession. So that's a long way of saying, I think collegiate athletes are great. I don't know where it ranks in the good qualities of an applicant, but it doesn't go unnoticed. I think a lot of programs look at that and say, this is the type of person who knows what hard work is. This is the type of person who doesn't let the little things get them down. And, I think that matters to a lot of people. Again, you can take a lot of your experiences and ask yourself, how does this reflect upon me in those big qualities? And you should really emphasize that as you build your application. It's not all just checkboxes. You do have an opportunity to put narratives in there. If you are a team captain, that's cool. Do that. You know, a lot of people mention when they overcame injuries. I think that that's good. I mean, a lot of us that have done athletics have been injured, so it's not necessarily a game changer, but you know, it does contribute to that sort of grit factor. So talk about the experience and what you got out of it. Don't make me guess what that meant. But no, I think it's generally a very positive thing. Yeah.
Awesome. And it seems like that kind of goes along with what you were saying about the adversities that you face and diversifying your application. Like that certainly would add to it.
Yeah. Once we've been out in the world working, we realize that like, I don't necessarily want my team to just be all the people with the 4.0 GPAs. When I'm in the ICU, I want hardworking people. I want people that have empathy, that have compassion, that are fun to be around, but also that I know I can count on, that have a strong work ethic and responsibility. I mean, those are things that matter when we're out here in the trenches doing the job, right? So yeah, I want you to be able to pass PA school, but I really want you to be good PAs.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, big picture is always you want them to do what's best for the patient, right? You want to groom these people to be amazing healthcare providers for the best outcomes of the patient. That's something that we love about you, is it's very clear that you take this personally, you know, like you have a stake in this and you're devoted to what you're doing so that you can, you know, put your mark onto the healthcare world. Another one of the things that we of course appreciate about you, but we'll get into that later.
I'm not very good at taking compliments, so
oh man, you're gonna get a lot of them at the end. Just wait.
Right. Well, we can keep it moving.
Let's see. So a lot of people are asking about reapplication and that process of if you weren't accepted, should you recontact the school? Should you ask them like, why wasn't I? Ask them for their criticism, what you can improve, and what the timeline for that should be. So how long after you get that rejection or whatever it is, do you wait until you contact them?
Yeah, great. I'm glad you guys asked that. Actually, I should have touched on this kind of thing before. So there's actually a range of responses that you're going to get as far as the decision goes. And so I know you didn't ask this specifically, but a lot of times that whole like I got waitlisted thing kind of pops up in this same conversation. And so I wanted to touch on that briefly too. I don't know if that's an upcoming question or not, but wait lists have a very negative connotation to them. And certainly everybody wants to be, early accepted right off the bat. Here you go, come join our program. But the fact of the matter is, if you think about the makeup of the admissions process, a lot of people get waitlisted. So if we only accept the number of seats we have, look, the best applicants are going to get accepted to 4 and 5 and 6 programs. We just know that the very top most desirable applicants are going to get accepted to a lot, which means that 5 or 6 programs are going to have their seats, offered to someone and then declined. So programs have to have robust wait lists. So if you got waitlisted, you're not like one of like 3, like losers that are like terrible. If you got waitlisted, you're very much somebody that program says, this is an incoming student as far as we're concerned. This is somebody that we know there's a very high chance of joining our program. So if you get waitlisted, it's not to say that you're inferior. In fact, if anything, it's a ringing endorsement. And so I think A, don't give up, because people dip into that wait list all the time. And B, understand what that means for you as an applicant. So if you got waitlisted and then were not accepted, and some people have reached out to me and be like, I was waitlisted at 2 programs and got into neither of them. I'm freaking out. What do I do? You need to understand what that tells you about your application. It tells you that you got way past the screening step, right? That means if you got waitlisted, it means you interviewed, right? So you were seen as a desirable person to offer an interview to, and you interviewed and you didn't blow the interview. Remember, I talked about all those ways you can blow an interview. You didn't do it because you got if you blew the interview, you wouldn't be waitlisted, I promise. So you got all that far. That means you're right there on the margin. So that's where you look at those things. Where can I get real gains and how can I improve myself? And you asked about contacting programs after rejection. And often the programs will not give you a step-by-step list of like, okay, here's what you could have done better. If they do, that's great. That's really, I mean, that's really generous of them. We just have such a volume that we often can't do that. And also it's kind of confidential because it tells you a lot about our process. We're like, actually, you scored this point on this thing. And then we have a system that tells us when we should let someone in. And like, no, we can't do that. We can't give up the secret recipe. So often you won't get that kind of feedback. So that's why you have to look at how far did I get and what does that tell me about my application? If you got interviewed and waitlisted, it's probably not your GPA. I mean, a higher GPA would help you, sure. But like, are you going to go retake all of your classes? No, that's crazy. You probably just need to start building yourself up. Give yourself a little bit of standout factor. Give yourself a little bit of that extra push, whatever it might be. Make yourself a little bit more well-rounded maybe. Tackle an area that you hadn't tackled before. And a year later, you really want to be able to say confidently what you did to improve. And usually, you know, retaking a class or two is fine, but I often want to see more than that. Like, I really want to see people show me a robust plan that they put into action where over the course of a year, they hit multiple areas of improvement. Maybe one or two of them was significant. Like, hey, last time I applied, I didn't really have any full-time healthcare experience. Now I worked full-time for a year on an inner city, paramedic rig and did X, Y, and Z. And my supervisor put me up for an award. Whoa, okay. Yeah, that was a big change from last year. So that's pretty, I want to see something kind of big that you tackled over that year. And then also show me a few other areas. Yeah, I didn't know a lot about the PA profession. And I've since shadowed 5 different PAs in 5 different specialties. And one of them wrote me a letter of recommendation because I was consistently building a relationship with them. Oh, okay, wow, okay, yeah. So I'm seeing different areas that you're hitting. And so you're probably not going to get a report card from a program that rejects you, but you should be able to, again, look at that introspection and then be able to show. I don't think this is a trade secret, but like GW specifically asks if you've applied to us before and what you did. It's a whole different little, you write in a paragraph, what you did differently. So it's highlighted. And I as a reviewer, I scroll right down to that sometimes because it saves me time. I'm like, oh, okay, so somebody already looked at you, but what happened since then? So I don't know if that answers your question completely, but I think that is sort of the mentality I would take to that. I'm reapplying. You asked about timeline. I have no idea. I mean, we try to move fast on these. So if it's months and months and months after you've interviewed, you may be kind of getting a little bit discouraged. But also it'll matter when you interviewed. So if you interviewed in August and the program waitlisted you and you haven't heard a no or a yes by December, like, hey, maybe that's just the time that they're taking. But if you interviewed in November and now it's March, you should probably already have your plan in motion to sort of reapply and what you're going to do to reapply. The tough thing is that because of you don't really have a full calendar year between getting a rejection and reapplying. It's more like 6 months, because you've interviewed and now it's, late fall and you're going to reapply in maybe May. So you should probably continue to do the things that make you great throughout the process. Don't hit submit on that CASPA application and then get complacent and stop improving yourself. Especially if you feel like, hey, there's a chance I don't get in this cycle, keep improving yourself throughout. Don't do anything crazy. Don't sell your house and move to some new job, and don't do like wild things. But if you can keep doing what you're doing, continue to build yourself up. If you do get that rejection, all right, not the end of the world. You're already moving towards making yourself a better applicant.
There's just so much good information in every answer you have, and I wish I could sit here and talk to you about it all day. Like, I feel like I could have like an hour-long discussion about any question you answer, but there's a million questions coming in, and I want to jump on to the next topic.
Yeah.
So it seems like a kind of like hot topic jumped out in the chat, and that is your opinion on the different like standardized tests and things like that. So GRE, your opinion on Casper and this PCAT emergence, like how do you feel about those kind of things?
Yeah, so a lot of my personal mission is to really help diversity in the PA profession. And the fact of the matter is that socioeconomic diversity is important, and racial and ethnic diversity is closely linked to socioeconomic diversity. So basically, a short way of saying marginalized people tend to be marginalized in a lot of different ways. So when we do stuff like increase barriers to getting into the application process or to getting into PA school in general, we hurt diversity. And so any part of the application process that has a price tag is like a little dagger in my heart. but I'm also a practical person, and I'm also on the inside of the machine too. And so I realized that there are baby steps to reforming this system. And so while I think standardized tests have a lot of flaws, I think that they are an additional cost to the application process, and they're probably not worth that cost. They are here right now. So I would say that my personal opinion is I don't like them. I would abolish standardized tests as a requirement to get in. I would do it for med school too. I would do it for any professional program, because I believe in sort of that equity and making it an equitable process. But as it stands right now, the GRE is the test that's often done. So I would say prepare for it. The harder you study, the fewer times you have to take it, and the more money you save. So prepare yourself for the GRE. There's all kinds of test prep out there. Take it, do as good a job as you can. If you feel like you are doing poorly on the GRE, you are not alone. PA students, especially successful PA students, especially PA students who go on to be great PAs, are notoriously bad at the GRE. You'd be surprised what the average GRE scores. In fact, most programs should probably publish them, but they're not amazing if you look at them. So don't get discouraged if your GRE score is not the highlight of your application. Definitely do it if a program requires it. It's more money, it's more time, and again, yeah, I don't like that, but it's a checkbox requirement in a lot of cases, and you don't want to get screened out because you didn't take the GRE. So a necessary evil, it's probably not even a necessary evil, it's just an evil that's here and we have to deal with it. And so I want you to deal with it as little as possible. So I want you to prepare just like you would for any other high stakes test. Yeah, you can always retake it. I think the question comes up a lot. Well, can I retake it and use my best of each score, quantitative and the verbal? Ask the program if they'll do that. Some programs will take the best of each and use that as your calculated GRE score, and some will not. Some will take the best that you did sitting down one time to take the test. So ask the program about that before you spend money retaking a test or kind of like, finagling the GRE. So that's my take on the GRE. The PCAT, yeah, you could probably guess where I'm going with this. I don't think the PCAT is a good idea. It's another standardized test. It's not validated in any way. A lot of the best PA educators out there, the most informed PA educators out there, are against these things, not because of the sort of ethical implications of them, but because they know they're poor surrogates for how you're going to do in PA school. And so another standardized test that's very poorly validated, that's going to be expensive, that's going to be an added expense for you all applying. No, I'm against that. And a lot of my finger on the pulse of the PA education community is we don't like it for all those reasons. It's going to make someone a lot of money if it gets, becomes the standard. And you all are not here to get someone rich. You're here to become good PAs. So I'm not good with the PCAT or any of the sort of equivalent tests. I don't like it.
And just to, touch on something that, like, it's just so impressive that you're able to talk about these things kind of from an outside perspective. So more specifically, like, obviously you talk a lot about diversity and minorities, and, to be blunt, you're a white male. So, I mean, that's just pretty awesome that you're able to see this kind of thing, because it's one thing to kind of walk a mile in somebody else's shoes, but then, like, to be able to consistently do that for people that you're advocating for is just very impressive.
Well, yeah, and unfortunately, the profession looks a lot more like me than it maybe should. And so I appreciate you saying that, but the truth is like, yeah, we need white people talking about these things too. We need white people calling out some of this BS too, because it's mostly white people around here. I don't know if you've looked at the breakdown of the PA profession, but we have a problem with not enough diversity. And so, yeah, if we don't start talking about it, there's not enough voices. So I think that we all need to sort of talk about this openly, and something I'm always willing to create dialogue around. And I know this is not necessarily the place for it, but I think it's related to this process, and I'm always open to having those conversations. So if people want to talk more about that, I'm always open to that conversation, no matter what side or ideas you have or how you feel about it. I always like the dialogue, because I think we end up in a good place. I've rarely gotten into an Instagram or Twitter tiff and like made an enemy. Usually we end up really understanding each other and kind of coming out in a positive place. So
Yeah, definitely. And that's another opportunity to plug your Instagram is, I mean, I didn't want to say it without you doing it first. I don't know if you want, you know, a million people asking you questions, but yeah, that is like gold, guys. Like if you think about the experience that, you know, he's had and the topics that he's able to talk about with his own personal knowledge, it's insane that you guys have this opportunity to make this connection. So we linked it in the chat. If you guys want to take a look at that, he puts a lot of good information. I'm you know.
Yeah, I try to make that high yield. I'm not the type that like, I don't post enough probably, but I want it to be useful, like information rich stuff. And I don't want to just like overload your feeds with junk. So yeah, just follow me. It's the best way to get the stuff, you know, right from the source. So
Yeah, we've looked through some of your articles that you've written and some of the things that you post, and it's so interesting, like a lot of different topics. So it's a really cool stuff on there. And it looks like we're coming up on the 2 hour mark. You're like, that is insane. You're awesome. You've just been sitting there monologue, evil villain for 2 hours. It's so impressive. How about one final question just to kind of jump off of, and then anything else you want to share with us, we'll always appreciate it. But we kind of talked about this a little bit beforehand, but could you share with us where you think the direction of the PA profession is going? So if you could discuss things like salary, oversaturation, role in medicine. I think everybody saw that USA Health whatever or USA whatever, we're like #1 in jobs. So that's kind of everybody's freaking out about that. So what is your take on that? You know, being somebody as close to the profession as you are.
yeah, I mean, the truth is I don't care a lot about what US News and World Report says about our profession. I mean, I know, no offense to journalists and writers. I've been one. I write a lot. I have a foot in that world, but they don't know what the best jobs are. And very few people have done enough jobs to even have an opinion on that. So I think it's nice to get positive press for the PA profession, but I don't really want the messaging out there to the world to be, hey, you want a quick fat paycheck that's pretty easy that you don't need to study much for, come and join the PA profession. A, that's terrible messaging, and B, it's not true in any way, shape, or form. This is a super hard job in a very tough industry. And yeah, we get rewarded well. I like that. I like that I have financial security, more financial security than I grew up with or had as a young adult. I like that I can support my friends and family financially. I think that's a great part of the PA profession. But you need to know that if you're coming into the PA profession, you're going to do hard work. It's going to sometimes be thankless. And it's very, very important and delicate and carries a lot of power and responsibility. We have a power and responsibility over our patients. You know, we wield a lot of power that can be abused if it's not handled correctly. And when people come to us, they're incredibly vulnerable. And we have a lot of influence on them, both indirectly and directly. And so we really need to approach this career path with a sense of reverence. I don't think we need to be holier than thou. I think we're allowed to be human beings, but I think we really need to have measured responsibility and really put everything into context. And I think some of that nuance and some of that context is lost when we just talk about things like work-life balance and salary and, oh, you only, quote unquote, only need a master's degree, which is like, if you've been through PA school, that's a ludicrous thing to suggest that that's an easy career path. So, you know, that's my take on it. I know that's a kind of like a Debbie Downer take on it, but that's kind of part of my role is to be the Debbie Downer. But really what I want to say is like, hey, this is a nice reward if you're willing to get into this profession for all of the right reasons. Yeah, you also won't starve. You also will have a roof over your head. Don't worry about that. You know, if you take care of this profession, it'll take care of you. But it really needs to happen in that order because we were not on that list, you know, 40 years ago when all of the pioneers were really trying to build this profession. And it's great because of those efforts, because people approach it with humility, because people said, I'm not just a clinician, I'm here to serve, I'm here to advocate, I'm here to build something. And that's why it's great. And so my message to a lot of people is, you know, you asked about the direction of the profession. The profession will go wherever this generation pushes it, whether that's up, down, sideways, or some other place. It's going to move where this current new crop of PAs and PA students and pre-PAs that are listening to this right now push it. The amount of PA programs have doubled in the last 15 years. Basically, since I started considering the PA profession, the amount of PA programs have doubled. That means the yearly output of new PAs has more than doubled because some of these programs are getting pretty big. That means that
there's going to be more young PAs than old PAs pretty soon. It hasn't quite hit that point yet, but there will be. It means that the attitudes and the culture of the people that are becoming PAs right now will have a much bigger influence than the generations of PAs that came before them, because there's going to be more of you. So whatever you do, however you act, whatever attitude you carry is going to frame the profession for the future. So what's going to happen with it? I don't know. Or where our salary is going to go and what's the job outlook going to be? Probably fine. Probably just fine. But who we are, what we represent, how the world perceives us and the impact we make, that is still to be determined. And so we really need to approach carefully how we take on the responsibility of not just patient care, but the mantle of this whole profession. And so that's why I like to spend a little part of talks like this talking about, diversity and what we owe our patients and who we are as people and the values we carry. I mean, all of that is going to matter. And so if you're not here for that talk, if you're not here to talk about what your values are and to talk about the responsibilities that we carry, then, you don't need to be in the profession, and so I think that I don't like to gatekeep the profession in any way. I want people of all, walks of life to be in the profession. But the one thing that I do want to keep out of the profession is selfishness and greed and apathy towards our responsibilities to patients and our communities. Those are the only things I want to keep out. As long as you're here to help people, to be good to each other, to have a reverence for our patient care, to be pillars in our communities, and to really lead healthcare from the front, come on board. We're going to make this thing better every single year, I think. And so I'm excited for it. I'm going to be here for it. I'm going to be here fighting the good fight no matter what. But I would love to see really passionate people who care a lot about other human beings and who care about, our society at large, kind of join me on some of this stuff, because we need a lot of help.
So well said. So well said. Yeah. I'm just thinking that even though this was a Q&A about application process and geared towards pre-PAs, if you guys can there's been consistently over 250 people here, pushing on 300 at some points. But if you guys take, one thing away from it, just please take that to absolute heart. Pre-PAPals started as this thing to where, like, pandemic, COVID, we want to get shadowing to other people. And we still do that. And it's awesome. Like, we're blessed to have this opportunity to share this with so many other people. It's really cool, but it's evolved into so much more than that. Like, we provide these opportunities to help you, but it's kind of diverged into something else. Like, we want to provide you with these people like Harrison that can talk to you about these things, so that once you become a PA, once you become whatever in the healthcare field, like, you're going to be awesome. We don't want you to just be another person who's in it for the materialistic things that he said. We want you to take these, life lessons to heart, so that once you're doing it, nobody's ever going to say, oh, I don't want to see the physician assistant anymore. Like, the reputation is going to be so big because of you guys. You're the future of healthcare. So just the fact that you're able to do this and take the time completely pro bono at no, benefit to yourself, just to give back to the community, because I know you do care about the future, means so much to us. So no better way, I think, that we could have ended that. If you have anything else to share, please feel free. But thank you so much. Sincerely, utmost sincerity, man. You're awesome.
Thank you. I'll just end it on a note of saying thanks to the two of you, and to, I guess a lot of people that are watching this. Do everything you can to further your careers, to become PAs if that's your passion. But once you're on this side, once you're in, look behind you as much as you can, hold that door open for the next generation, really give back in any way you can. That's what's going to make the profession better. So if this helped you in any way, please, just in the back of your mind, remember at some point in your career to maybe do the same thing. You don't have to do it as a PA student or as a new grad. You're going to be learning a lot and overloaded, but keep in mind that, service and service to each other are also a part of this. So, I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk to all of you, and I wish you all the absolute best of luck. You can reach out to me. I have a feeling I'm going to get a lot of messages. So if I don't get back to you or don't get back to you quickly, please forgive me, but just know that you have my support no matter what.
Yeah. And kind of those, those compliments that you didn't want to take earlier. You got to end it on that, right? Man, you're an amazing speaker. You're so charismatic. Like your personality really shines through the entire way. You're so efficient in your delivery of all this information. Like you do such a good job, you know, packing in all of these important topics into such a concise amount of time. So I think that this session has been so important. Like if you guys refer back to this, like I can't recommend it enough. And just to give you, Harrison, an idea, I know you might, if you want to tomorrow, you can look back at the YouTube video and it'll actually show the chat. I know you can't like do two things at once, but if you want to go back and look at it, just to give you an idea, million thank yous. Everybody says thank you. Like favorite session, love the honesty. This is my favorite session, passion, honesty, just incredible. Like so many people, it's just exploding. Like everybody loves you as well. They should. We love you as well. Please don't cry.
No, that's
But
I
yeah.
appreciate that.
So yeah, you definitely deserve everything, man. Just keep doing what you're doing. We're just pre-PA, so I don't know how much weight our word means, but on behalf of all of these people, like, thank you. Utmost sincerity.
It means a lot. So I really appreciate it. All of you, the two of you especially, but you know, everyone out there, for those kind words, I really appreciate it. It does mean a lot. You know, you're just future colleagues, you know, that's the only difference. You know, I appreciate the opportunity, and yeah, I hope to run into all of you in the future.
Likewise. All right, Harrison, thank you again. We can't thank you enough. We'll be in touch. If you ever want to do something like this again, you'll be the first one.
Oh, I'd be happy to.
Awesome. So just I hope you know that, you know, your time is well spent here, and this really resonated with a lot of people.
Thanks so much, you too. I really appreciate it. Best of luck.
Oh, likewise. I wish you the best. Take care. Good night. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Good night.
Wow, guys, such a good session. Man, that was amazing. Harrison's awesome. His Instagram's still up. We highly recommend you guys check that out. He's so cool. A lot of good information. And if you look back into his history, like he's not just like some young PA. I know he looks really young, but he has like, I think 15 years in the profession, something like that. He's a chief editor for like the official AAPA magazine, JAPA. Man, he's just done so much, like all these accolades, but the way he's able to talk and just like, you know, kind of connect with everybody here is, you know, it's awesome. You don't feel like you're talking to like this typical distinguished professor, super intimidated. You talk to somebody that you feel like you're talking to somebody that you can relate to. So can't brag on him enough. And just the fact that he does those things is so impressive. And like he said, I hope you guys take that away and are able to share that sentiment one day. But yeah, guys, so we're going to put that quiz, but really summary out into the chat right now in just a second. So like we said earlier, it's not the usual 5-question quiz that you're used to. This time we just asked for a short summary, maybe what you took away from this, your favorite part of the session, something you learned, a summary of it, however you want to do, just to kind of make sure that you were in attendance. We're going to leave that open for 1 hour.
Yep.
We're going to leave that open for 1 hour. And that way we'll be able to send you a certificate. Same kind of deal. The only difference is this time, obviously it wasn't a shadowing session. We didn't talk about case studies or the medicine as much as it was, you know, a webinar to help you with your application. So, I mean, obviously that's gold and just insanely valuable, but we still want to provide you with something to be able to say that, you know, I was here, I did this. So we are going to be sending out the certificates, and rather than shadowing hours, it'll say webinar, kind of just like a little way to diversify your experience. And man, this was awesome. We're going to look forward to doing more of this kind of stuff, getting different perspectives on the field. There's a lot of good PAs that want to help you guys with tips about your application cycle, answer your own individual questions. So yeah, stay tuned, guys. We've already got the next few weeks lined up, I think, going into February. So we'll be back every week unless, you know, something crazy happens, but if not, we'll keep you posted. But yeah, guys, so oh, do you want to pin it?
The link for that is already sent out. I'll pin it in just a second. And then our next session is going to be this Monday, the 18th, and it's not going to be a Q&A session, but it's going to be something similar to this. She has a really great PowerPoint prepared for you guys that she made a while ago, and she's been working on for forever. So really excited for you guys to see this one.
Oh yes, absolutely. And insider info, that one we won't actually be saving on YouTube because
Right.
you know, I guess her own privacy, and she put a lot of work into this presentation. So it's kind of like you're there to see it or you're not type thing. So definitely don't miss that one, guys. It's going to be amazing. And yeah, just to end it, guys, thank you so much. Y'all are awesome. I love to see all of the stuff in the chat. I mean, your support means everything. It makes us so worth it. I love how you guys kind of answer each other's questions, break out into side discussions. It's so cool. It's so cool to see like this community, you know. It makes me so proud to see that, like, you know, our peers, the people that are going to be in healthcare one day, actually care about each other, willing to help each other out. So very cool, guys. We'll be hanging out. We're right here. If you want to ask us a question in the chat or anything, you have a question about whatever it may be, we're right here. But I guess that's it, y'all.
So we'll be hanging out, and have a good night, everybody. Thank you for joining.
Take care. Until next time.